Brаття, ми славені часі, Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 445 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And somehow we have already smashed our goal and are sitting at $6.6 thousand of the fundraiser.
$6,600. We didn't even hear that yeehaw. It was so hyped up. We've already passed the fundraiser goal tonight, and we're well on our way towards $10,000 already. Honestly, that's unbelievable. And also, to even add to the fun, for some reason, once again, YouTube has removed the feature where it shows people donating to the fundraiser in the live chat. So the only people that show up tonight are Psyops, who is a moderator, me, who is a channel owner, and if Matthew ever donated, he would also show up as well. Beyond that, it has made everyone else completely disappear. So we don't even know who exactly has been able. Well, actually, we know who it was.
We do know, actually. We have to go ahead. We have to call him out right now. Mark, Colonel of the LSA. I assume he put in $5,000 himself because there's no way we could have reached that figure. And he said he carried it. And I believe him 100%. And Mark, huge shout out to you for carrying that fundraiser so fast.
Someone call a chiropractor because his back is hurting from carrying this whole fundraiser already. I mean, like, jeez, that was unbelievable. And also, dang it, man, I closed out the that tab. Let me go and grab it again real quick. But let me go and make sure that we have a live count, because also YouTube removed the count from the live like chat
Mark.
in a way about 2 months ago, and so we don't get to see the total there anymore. But we've reached $6,726 on the fundraiser already. We're blowing it out of the park tonight, and not only that, Ukraine is liberated miles of ground today in the southern flank of Bakhmut. Y'all thought that what we saw in Deep State UA about the past 5 or 6 days was big? Wait until you see what happened today. The southern flank is collapsing in on itself. It is truly imploded, and it appears that the Russian army is disappearing off that area of the front line. They gave up an area about 5 miles wide and about 4 miles deep today, about 16 to 18 square miles of territory they have retreated off of today in the southern area of Bakhmut. To give you all a context of how big that is, it took the Russian army 4 months to cover that ground, and they just lost it all today. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into tonight's news, about as hyped as anyone could get at this point. And also, once again, just to get one more count, because sadly I can't really see this as easily as we used to. It is $6,759 right now that has been donated to Razom for Ukraine. And also, I forgot even to mention what the fundraiser is tonight. Tonight's fundraiser is Razom for Ukraine. We picked this one because, one, Mark, Colonel of the LSA, actually suggested that we pick that one, and so we did, and then he went and carried the whole thing already in literally the first minute of the stream. Second, the reason why we pick Razom, and also why Mark likes Razom for Ukraine, is because Razom is a fundraiser that is from Ukraine, that is registered here in the United States, and so it is a Ukrainian-run nonprofit. On top of that, they also have amazing programs and projects that Razom for Ukraine undertakes. And one of my personal favorites is the Soldier Scholarship Fund. They actually provide college scholarships to soldiers in Ukraine, full paid scholarships for any soldier that served in the army of Ukraine and applied for a scholarship from Razom, so that way they can either go to a full-on college or to a trade school and learn themselves a valuable trade or get themselves a degree that will greatly benefit them in placing themselves into a great job and a great opportunity even while the war is going on. It is an amazing service that Razom provides, and if you want to know more about what Razom does, they have a full-on website on the internet. Just type in Razom for Ukraine on Google and then click on their website, and they have like 20 or 30 different projects that they are running right now. My honest favorite, of course, is the Soldier Scholarship, but there are many other things that they're doing across Ukraine that are helping out not just the soldiers, but the citizenry as well. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the first bit of news tonight, where we saw, and this is just an appetizer for tonight before we get into the rout that happened at Bakhmut again today. In the area of St. Petersburg, we saw that a company is producing literal rickshaws for the Russian army. It's gotten that bad. The technology side of things is so bad that they are truly producing kind of like battery-powered rickshaws. This is the best that the Russians can make at this point in the war, is this thing.
That is pathetic.
It's sad. And to explain what it is, let's see here. They made self-propelled carts. They're not really self-propelled. They just kind of have a small motor in it to make it easier for the person pulling and moving the rickshaw to operate it. So it's not self-propelled in that sense, but it does help the operator to move it. It's for moving wounded Russian soldiers. Assembled are two variants, a gasoline-powered version and a battery-powered version. Due to convenient control, the company states, one person can easily move a load weighing up to 250 kilograms. And so it appears that this company in Nizhny Novgorod is expecting for the Russian army to be taking a massive amount of casualties, because 250 kilograms is about the weight of three whole people that they're expecting to have loaded onto this thing and then have them dragging it off the field. They're not even coming up with stuff anymore like, you know, like that stupid crap like we saw like the armored tractor a while ago. They're not even coming up with stuff to try and help them to fight the war anymore. They're just coming up with stuff to try and get the wounded and dead Russians off of the field now. And that tells you the mindset of how badly it's going for the Russians, and also how much of a critical gap, I guess you could say, in equipment that helps out with that. We can see them loaded into crates right here, and we can also see them loading them into the back of a truck to then take to Ukraine, so that way the Wagner unit can quickly drop these things and just run away, because we know that no Russian unit has hardly ever picked up their wounded or dead before. And so with that,
I have a feeling there's going to be a huge like mod community like around these self-propelled carts with like tillers being attached to them and stuff like that.
dude, you know, some Russian is going to sit there and go, then you seen it, then you know, drifting this thing around Bakhmut, playing Tokyo Drift. But anyways, with that, we're off from this goofy thing. Once again, showing how bad the Russians are off. And we're now going to be moving up to Murmansk, where we saw that a conscription office was burned to the ground today. And so here's a small clip after the fire had taken off of the conscription office burning to the floor. And we see the smoke billowing out of all sides of the building. It appears that the fire has gotten quite out of hand, at least on the floor that it was started at. Smoke is coming out literally everywhere. And how in the world are the Russians ever going to get more cannon fodder without the conscription offices? It's going to be terrible for them. It's already bad enough. Now imagine them losing all of the paperwork that they need to make sure to process these conscripts. Now the Russians are going to have no choice but to just drive around and pick up people off the street randomly and then send them to the front. It's dreadful. And so with that, we're going to be...
terrible. I get no respect. I get no
man,
respect.
I'm telling you, it's terrible. It's terrible. But you know what's not terrible?
What's that?
Our fundraiser, because it just reached $7,000!
Hey! Jagga, let's go.
That's crazy, honestly. We've already reached $7,064 in just 20 minutes. Insane. But moving on from Murmansk and on out of Russia and on into Germany, and right near the border of Belgium, we're going to be going to the small and ancient German town of Aachen while this thing loads. Aachen is a town that...
my back is Aachen.
And speaking of your back is Aachen. Aachen was actually called the Stalingrad of the Western Front in the Second World War, because the kind of battle that was fought within the city of Aachen was so bad that the U.S. Army actually started to bring in full-on siege artillery pieces to blast buildings away at point-blank range, because the Germans would not give up the town. Beyond that side note, it is also the modern location of a training facility that is helping Ukrainians to learn how to operate equipment, vehicles, and weaponry of the NATO alliance, and then send them back into Ukraine, hopefully to use with great effect. And so here's the video that they put together. We're also going to mute the music because I don't know if it's copyrighted or not, but we can see the flag of Germany over here to the right, the flag of Ukraine in the center, and the flag of the EU over here to the left. Honestly, man, those flags, I don't know who got it out, but someone got out like a Stanley steamer and steamed these flags. There's not a single crease in any of them. We can also see the Panzerhaubitze 2000 right here that they may be trained on, and a mortar in the background behind these Ukrainian soldiers. We can now see some of them hopping into a dingo, and Zelensky is here right now checking out this armored car. And we can now see them loading up a Panzerhaubitze 2000 onto the back of a trailer. This one still has the here markings on it, or the markings of the Bundeswehr. We can also see them replacing the engine at the front of the Panzerhaubitze. And now they're gently lowering it into place. We can also see a German soldier explain how they're doing the engine replacement, and we can now see Zelensky giving a speech alongside. Sadly, I'm not really sure who that is, but Zelensky is giving an address.
That
beside him.
is Schultz.
Really?
Yes.
No, wait, dude, I swear, this whole entire war, I've swore Schultz looked different.
That's him. As far as my knowledge, that is him.
Oh, God, man. The Russian propaganda is going to have a field day. Schultz! But anyways, we're going to let the video continue. We can see Zelensky giving the address. Hopefully there's no music. There is music, sadly, so we're going to have to mute it. And we can now see him handing out medals to the soldiers of Ukraine who are currently training at this base near Aachen. You know what? I feel kind of goofy for forgetting who Schultz is. Like, you know, Schultz was such a big character, especially in Russian propaganda at the beginning of the war, and we did see his face at least 4 or 5 times, and I completely forgot what Schultz looked like. Anyways, with that, we're going to be moving on from that clip. Once again, great to see that Ukrainian soldiers are being trained in Germany, and hopefully to great effect. And once they go back to Ukraine, they'll be able to help out in defending the lines and pushing the Russians back out of the occupied territories. Moving on into the city of Kharkiv real quick, which is kind of a little odd. Usually we go to the location unknowns, but this time the city of Kharkiv is a little interesting. We had a very neat video here of a dog. And this dog had actually been wounded quite significantly by a Russian artillery attack way back in the day and ended up losing a leg. But amazingly enough, it's been outfitted with some kind of, and let me make sure I get the name correct, a bio-integrated prosthesis. And it simulates perfect leg functions. It is very interesting to see. And so here's the clip. We can see the dog coming up. And we're about to see the prosthesis here on the rear end of the dog. And interestingly enough, this thing articulates kind of like a normal leg.
Oh, that's pretty interesting.
That is. I gotta tell you, the world of prosthetics is making some incredibly large advances, because I remember back when we were kids, you know, prosthetics were not that advanced. You know, it was very easy to see if someone did have a prosthetic on or not. But yet, nowadays, it's like, rather than the odd shape of it, and of course not looking like a normal dog leg, it still functions just like one, and that is pretty wild to see, and great to know that they also got this poor dog that lost its leg a prosthesis for it to use. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from that little clip in Kharkiv. Just thought I'd show it to y'all, because I thought it was great to know that that dog got a prosthetic leg. And who's to say that it didn't come from the International Fund for Animal Welfare, which we have run a fundraiser before. We don't really know that for certain, though. But with that, we're now going to be moving on into our location unknowns. And we have some pretty interesting ones today, starting off with our first one that showed the Russian army in the modern day, summarized in a 30-second clip. This is a UAZ 452 truck and is carrying some kind of an unidentified thingamajig behind it. Here's the clip. We can see just slowly and sadly moving along and carrying this thing. I don't know what the hell that is, but it's stupid, suffice it to say.
It's a mini tank for those small people.
Russia's about to have an army of dwarves operating these things, but I don't know what the hell this is. But this summarized the Russian army in a good way at this point in the war. They are burned out. There's really nothing left for them to use, and it's just sad all the way around. And so with that, we're going to be moving on into the next clip, where we can also see a peon, a Ukrainian peon, coming out of its subterranean lair in a way. And so here's the clip. Sadly, no, Jared, mute. We can't play the music. It's very copyrighted. But we can see the peon coming on out of its hole. And it's nice to see it coming out of its shell every once in a while. And it immediately goes on its way to a pre-designated spot to fire. And so with that, that's the end of the clip. But really cool to see one of these peons coming out of its lair. And these peons, while quite old, have an incredibly long range and have been helping the Ukrainians to hit ammunition depots far behind the lines that other artillery pieces, even including the M777, cannot reach. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from that little bit of location unknown news and on into our next one, where we saw a Ministry of Defense update from the United Kingdom. Now, usually we don't include these. These come out every single day by the United Kingdom, but I thought I'd include this one today because it does say a lot of things that we've been saying on this channel. And so let's read it out. On paper, the Russian Combined Grouping of Forces, otherwise known as the CGF, in Ukraine is similarly organized to the invasion force of 446 days ago. It still likely consists of over 200,000 personnel organized into around 70 combat regiments and brigades divided into 5 groups of forces. It still struggles with limited freedom to conduct air operations. However, in February of 2022, it consisted of largely professional soldiers, was largely equipped with reasonably modern vehicles, and had been regularly exercised, aspiring to complex joint operations. Now the force is mostly poorly trained, mobilized reservists, and increasingly reliant on antiquated equipment, with many of its units severely under strength. It routinely only conducts very simple, infantry-based operations. Critically, it is unlikely that combined grouping of forces has been able to generate a large, capable, mobile reserve to respond to emerging operational challenges. It is unlikely to be an organization which will effectively cohere large-scale military effect along the 1,200-kilometer front line that is currently under stress. And so, let's break this down, and let's see what this is saying. And we also have a lot of video footage to back this up. First, it says that the number of forces that are in Ukraine has most likely not changed, and we can say that that's also true as well. The Russians have taken incredibly high losses, but the Russians have also been bringing in an incredibly high amount of reinforcements. But then, once again, that ties into the factor that these are no longer professional fighting forces like you would have seen, or what you would have thought to have seen at the beginning of the war. These are mostly mobics and conscripts at this point. We don't really see any of those professional contract soldiers any longer, because almost all of them have been killed at this point. On top of that, all of the equipment that those professional soldiers came in, which was T-72B3s, T-80BVMs, T-80Us, vehicles like that, they're practically non-existent on the field any longer. They've run out of nearly all of those tanks, and so we're starting to see that they're almost nothing but T-72As, which is about as advanced as the Russian army is at this point, T-62Ms, and T-55s. That's largely what their armor consists of, and everything that they have is starting to devolve into a worse and worse state. BMP-3s are practically non-existent anymore. We've never really seen a BMP-3 for about the past 4 or 5 months. BMP-2s are even getting a little bit more hard-pressed to find, especially in Russian BTGs that are in operation on the front line. We're starting to see that once where we saw BMP-2s, we're starting to see either BMP-1s or just MTLBs, which are some of Russia's worst APCs. That's very comparable to an American M113 armored personnel carrier, which was largely phased out of service almost entirely right after the invasion of Iraq. We're not really seeing the Russians have any advanced or any capable fighting forces anymore, at least on film. And so the Ministry of Defense update is entirely accurate on saying that while they may have the same number of forces there, just having 200,000 guys doesn't mean anything. Because you can have 200,000, well, let's say SEAL Team 6 guys. Obviously, there's not that many of them. But let's say you have 200,000 SEAL Team 6 guys, and you also have 400,000 guys on the other side, but all of them are peasants from the medieval era armed with pitchforks. Obviously, a little bit of a I guess you could say, disparity in the abilities of the 200,000 SEAL Team 6 guys versus the 400,000 peasants with pitchforks. And that's largely what they're trying to say right here. On top of that, once again, to summarize it all, because these are not professional forces any longer and they're equipped with backwards equipment to say the least, there's really no way for them to try and hold down the 1,200-kilometer long front line that just exists within Ukraine, from one end of the border up near the Kharkiv area or the Kupiansk area and all the way down towards Kherson. It's practically impossible for them to do that because they're so poorly trained and so poorly equipped that there really isn't much they can do anymore. And that's why we see that in places like Bakhmut, where the Ukrainians are conducting a pushback, they're meeting very little to no resistance, nearly, at least from what we can tell, and the Russian forces in the area are crumbling. They don't have the ability to really stand up against the Ukrainian army if they focus their efforts and resources in a single area, and I think that shows that the Ukrainian counteroffensive could possibly happen within days or weeks, like we've been saying. I feel like we've been saying that for a while, and I still believe that it could happen within days or weeks. There's no question about it. because the Ministry of Defense, the British Ministry of Defense, is stating the very same things we've been saying and showing on this channel for nearly months at this point. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from the Ministry of Defense report, once again, very interesting to read, and on into our next bit, where we saw a T-80 in a training exercise in a Ukrainian training field in the western part of the country. This is a very interesting video because they hit that Tokyo drift. Dude, they're driving that thing like a bat out of hell, man. I love to see it. Love to see it. We love to see it. It's absolutely great. And it was really cool to see that. Really not much more to say. It was just neat. And so with that, we're moving on into our next bit of location unknown news, where we also saw in the middle of the night, last night, a Priorin manpad was able to intercept a Russian missile and shoot it down. And because it was nighttime, it was a lot more, I guess you could say, explosive looking than normal. Here's the clip. We can hear the missile flying over in the night sky, and we can see some kind of a light over there. It may have been the moon. It looks like it may be the moon. We hear some Ukrainian soldiers talking there.
Ігорьок, збивай акумулятор. І ще пиздує, сука.
We hear him continuing to talk. And when you hear the missile fly right over,
прохуярила, нижче.
you hear the Ukrainian talking a little bit faster, and we can see the Priorin fires. And there it goes, following the missile. And it goes nuclear. Good morning. Good morning, Ukraine. How's everyone doing out here? And, you know, someone just woke up, Matthew, and thought, what is it, morning already? And then the light dissipated, and they went, oh, no, it's not. And then he went back to sleep.
Пидорасина, блядь!
Есть! Ты снял?
Да!
Ты снял? Ловко снял?
Да!
And I'm going to say, that is an impressive video, especially because it was at night, and it made the explosion of the missile look like it was the sun rising in the morning. But great to see that the Ukrainian air defenses have really gotten down the ability to shoot down cruise missiles and ballistic missiles with nothing more than manpads. And I'll remind you all, this is nothing normal. This has been normal throughout the Ukraine war, but the first time that a cruise missile or a ballistic missile has ever been shot down in history by a manpad was in this war last year in July. That was the first time in recorded history that a manpad ever shot down a missile of that kind. And it's crazy to think that the Ukrainians have made that a normal fact of life, that a single manpad, and these things cost a relatively inexpensive amount, especially compared to the missile it's shooting down, are able to shoot down these $3.5 million missiles with relative ease from what it looks like on these videos. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that last bit of location unknown news, and we're now going to be moving on to the Kyiv Independent, because we have to go to Twitter. Peter, the Twitter's here. And so, let's scroll on down, and let's go to the Casualty Report. And it's a good one today. It's a good one. Here we go.
Oh, they're looking juicy. I see 2 bobcats.
2 bobcat skid steers. I gotta tell you, it's nice to see. And I don't see... Oh, wait a minute! Hey! Ron Anderson threw down an M777 firing. HR put down another bobcat. 2 for Matt. Only 2 for Matt today. It's not that bad, though. Another 2. Wait a minute, is that like a reoccurring meme now? Oh, wait, no, it's not. It's just the same picture, but not the same text. Still, it is amazing to see that 2 bobcat skid steers were destroyed. Of course, it is a lot to ask for even one of them to be destroyed, so 2 of them being destroyed is a miracle. Speaking of miracles, the front line has what looks like a pure miracle today, and that's no joke. 620 Russian soldiers have bit the dust in the past 24 hours. And once again, note, these are not including the killed and wounded. This is just the killed number alone. 620 of them in 24 hours. Not only that, but they were then accompanied by a side of 18 armored personnel carriers garnished with 7 supply trucks. Quite a decent number. A little bit below average in the supply truck number, but the armored personnel category is starting to go a little bit higher than normal, actually. It usually is around 12 to 15. 18 is getting on up there. Not only that, but 5 main battle tanks were also destroyed over the past 24 hours. Once again, nice to see, and it's good to know that the Ukrainians are somehow still seeking out these rarer and rarer Russian main battle tanks and destroying them, no matter how old or how new they are. And we also saw that a whopping 21 artillery systems were wiped out over 24 hours. Now, to do the math, and, you know, everyone's really scared now because I don't do math well, but let me go and get the calculator out. 21 divided by 4. 5 1/4 artillery batteries were destroyed over the past 24 hours, at least in the raw numbers. And once again, I kind of have to give the disclaimer every time we come out with those numbers, that doesn't mean that it was all D20s and D30s or Mista Bs or Gyantsant Bs or Mista S's that were destroyed. These artillery systems could be anything, from a 81mm mortar to a 63mm automatic mortar to a Nona to a Mista S to a D30 to a D20. There are an endless amount of different kinds of artillery systems that the Russians use, so it really could be a combination of all of them. But it's still amazing to see that 21 of them were destroyed, because every single artillery piece that is destroyed is once again limiting the Russians' ability to hold the Ukrainians at bay at all. Really, the only thing that is keeping Russian forces from completely collapsing right now is the overwhelming amount of artillery that they have, and that overwhelming amount of artillery is a curse unto itself, because they've also started to run out of ammo, and so it's become a lot harder to operate these pieces. But the more artillery pieces that are destroyed makes it even more difficult for the Russians to conduct artillery strikes on the Ukrainians, therefore making it way easier for the Ukrainians to be able to launch offensives or fight the Russians head on. We also saw that they lost a total of 31 drones over the past 24 hours. Most of those were Shahed 136s that were launched during another drone attack, and most of them were successfully shot down. Only about 3 of them made it through the air defenses out of around 26 of them launched. So once again, an incredibly good number, and great to see. And only 1 MLRS was destroyed, but they've lost 562 of them over the course of the entire war, and that already comes from a fairly low number of MLRSs to begin with. I believe the Russians only have about 1,600 MLRSs in the Russian army, and out of that, almost 600 of them have been destroyed, so they only have about 1,000 left. So once again, the frontline losses have been significant today, especially in every category. Either they are right on average, or they're above average in most categories, and it appears to be quite a good day for everyone involved, except for the Russians. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from the casualty report and on out of our location unknowns, and we're now going to be moving into the front lines, the northeastern area, and specifically Bakhmut, most likely for the rest of the night, as it's been a sweep. I'm not going to show the deep state map just yet, but when y'all see the frontline map today, y'all are going to be completely blown away with how quickly the Ukrainians have started to take ground on both flanks. It's made the last 6 days, like I said at the beginning of the stream, look like they were nothing in comparison to how badly the Russians were beaten today. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into that news, but before we get to it, we have to address the polls. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and real quick, just a fundraising update. We're currently at $8,256 of the $5,000 goal. So, jaga. I gotta say, that is extremely impressive, and thank you so much, folks, for helping us to reach that so fast. Sadly, tonight, like the Enforcer said earlier, YouTube is having a glitch where it's not showing us who is donating what amount of money. So sadly, we can't call out everyone tonight who put in the top donations, but we want to personally thank each and every one of you for being generous as always. And we actually hit our goal faster than ever tonight, thanks to Mark Colonel of the LSA, and also, I guess it coincides with not showing donations on the live chat. I guess maybe that helped people donate. I don't know.
Maybe. And also, let me real quick, while I have that terrible voice crack, let me give y'all a quick breakdown or a reenactment of what it was like for us at the start of the stream. So I sat there and went, okay, it's live. Man, dude, I'm having a problem with my dashboard. And like that lasted for like 1 minute. I said, okay, finally, I got it up. Matthew, and we already passed $5,000? And he said, what? No. And I said, well, where in the world did it come from? And he said, I don't know, it's not showing in the live chat. And then that's when we figured out, one, they're not showing the donations in the live chat tonight. YouTube's apparently decided that that's just too luxurious. And then two, we realized that we had passed the fundraiser goal in literally 1 minute and 30 seconds. So when I sat there and put out my message tonight, come on, LSA, let's pass $1,000. That was before I'd even seen that we had passed $1,000 and we'd already passed the fundraiser goal for the night. But still, I got to thank each and every one of y'all who is here tonight for just being here. And also, being here on a momentous night where we've already reached $8.3 thousand raised in this fundraiser. We can't even see who's donating tonight to thank y'all individually for y'all's support. But I do want to tell every single one of y'all that y'all are what make the Lee Spring Army the most amazing group on the entirety of the internet. There is no other YouTube channel out there from what I've been able to understand that has been able to fundraise the amounts that the Lee Spring Army has for any cause anywhere. We are right now. Let me pull out my phone because let me tell y'all the total that we had before this stream went live, and also let me make sure to adjust the date that I put this down. So I put this down on May 13th. And let me click done. Right now at this moment, without even adding in the fundraiser that we've run tonight, we've raised $946,253 in support of Ukraine. That is a massive amount. Son. We're almost, well, actually right now, adding in this fundraiser, we're well over around $950,000. We're on our way towards $960,000. We're only around $40,000 or a little over away from reaching $1 million. And I've got to thank every single one of y'all here in the Lee Spring Army for being with us every single step of the way as we continue to cover this news and helped us to not only support the Ukrainians, but also let them know that they are still, that there's people out there who still support them and still care for them 445 days into this war. It is unbelievable to think that all of y'all have been here with us every single step of the way, and that so many of y'all have helped us to blow these fundraisers out of the water for this long. It's been so long that YouTube doesn't even allow me to run new fundraisers without deleting old ones because they only allow us a maximum of 50, and we've run so many Sunday fundraisers, we're not allowed to run any extra ones. I'll actually show y'all that. That's a point of pride to me, and I feel like it ought to be a point of pride to the LSA, is that when I do this, and I'll show y'all. So here is my control screen kind of thing. And when I want to go down here to add a fundraiser and I click create fundraiser, watch this at the bottom of the screen. Sorry, you're limited to 50 fundraisers at this time. We've run so many of these things and we have never missed a single Sunday since we've been able to do this. Every single Sunday without fail, we've always run a fundraiser. That YouTube doesn't even allow us to make another one without deleting an old one. And of course,
we've run so many fundraisers. They're sick of us fundraising.
Yeah, they really are. I mean, honestly, they are, because there's no one else, I think, in the history of YouTube that has actually used the fundraisers to this degree, or raised this much in this degree. YouTube's probably taking a loss having to account for all of this, honestly, at this point, which honestly, they deserve it for removing all of the fundraiser features from the live chat and stuff. But it is still unbelievable to think that we've done so much in support of Ukraine, and so much so that now I have to go through and pick a fundraiser to delete every single Sunday before we run a new one. And also, just in case you're all wondering, how in the world do we keep track of all this? Whenever I go to delete one like this, and I have to click delete, I always get on my phone because there's a massive note page on my phone about the fundraiser, and I put down the total that was raised in that fundraiser and then delete it, so that way we can make sure to always go back if we need to and hand calculate the total all over again. So we always want to make sure that we keep track of that. And also, these are all the fundraisers that the Lee Spring Army's run, except for the ones we had to delete to be able to keep on running the fundraisers up till today. But it's amazing. Also, Tom Exman said, how do you add the total? Back in the day, I used to always go back and hand add all of the totals together every single time it was asked about. But that became incredibly laborious, especially when it got up to around 50. So now I had them all added together, and I put down a note every single Sunday of what the amount raised was before that fundraiser. And then after the next Sunday fundraiser ends, I add that to the total. And that's how we continue to keep track of how much we've raised exactly. So that's your answer as to how we've been doing that. But it's absolutely amazing, and Matthew actually just sent me a message saying, rabbit holing, man, and we are rabbit holing. But I got to thank every single one of y'all so much once again for making this possible all the way even on the 445th day of the war. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are now moving on into the polls. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and our very first poll says, leaked docs allege that Prighozin offered to help Ukraine target Russian troops back in January, and what are your thoughts? And yes, that is the report, and I'm kind of shocked and kind of not at the same time. But 37% said that's astonishing, and damn. 23% said unsure, 19% said Prighozin is not loyal, and 21% said I'm not surprised one bit. And I will say that we knew that Prighozin wasn't loyal. he's a gun for hire, and people like that are never loyal. He's also a very evil individual. He doesn't care about killing innocent people if it means he gets some money. So not shocked he doesn't have any morals there, but I am kind of shocked that it came out publicly. And the way he went about it was he was basically, according to the leaked docs, begging Ukraine to take that offer so that way he could save his own skin and his troops and sacrifice his Russian comrades on the other side. So quite interesting, and I'm kind of semi-shocked and semi-not. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that's shocking in a way. Not so much shocking now knowing what he's saying, talking about open revolt against the Russian government, things like that. It's not that shocking, but it is pretty wild to hear that he sat there and said, Wagner, please let us help you kill our own people. It's like, that's a little bizarre. And also, did that come from Thug Shaker Central again?
Yeah, supposedly that came from the Discord leaks, and they just combed through there and found that detail.
Oh, man. There's a lot of stuff coming out of Thug Shaker Central, and I think, honestly, Matthew, Prighozin is no longer going to be a Thug Shaker in the Central area. I think he's going to be a Thug Shaker as a splat on the pavement, because they're going to be flinging him out a window stat. And so with that,
Without a doubt.
I hope that does address that fairly well, because that is insane to hear. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one says, Ukrainian forces confirmed that Russia shot down 5 of its own aircraft yesterday, and what are your thoughts? 69%. Nice. Science would be proud. He said, wow, Russia is unbelievably stupid. 6% said unsure. 18% said I'm a little skeptical, and 6% said that sounds like propaganda. And I'm going to have to be with the 18%. I'm a little bit skeptical. I know Russia isn't competent, like we said the other day, but to shoot down 5 of their own aircraft, it was 3 jets and 2 helicopters, all on the same day throughout the day. That seems almost unlikely. I'm not sure what the reason for making that story up would be, but it just seems a little bit out of reality. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, and I'm trying to think about what I'm going to say about that. I'd actually kind of believe it, because it even, and I didn't include this tonight because it was kind of like superfluous information, but Prighozin once again talked to a reporter, and he also said that it was the Russian Air Force, or the Russian ground forces, that had shot down these aircraft, and all of them were shot down over the course of 6 hours within a 20-kilometer radius of each other, all kind of like in a circle. And so he said, figure out which air battery was within that 20-kilometer radius, and there's the people who did it. But we don't know exactly who was within that 20-kilometer radius. And also, if it was it could be propaganda, sure, to make the Russians look dumb, but I think it would have been far better for Ukraine, propaganda-wise, to say they had shot them down, because then it makes it look like the Ukrainians somehow now have the ability to not only destroy Russian aircraft within Ukrainian airspace, but destroy Russian aircraft well over the border. And so, considering that, I think, and from my standpoint, I think it would have been better propaganda if, we're trying to take a propaganda spin on this, for the Ukrainians to have claimed that they shot them down instead of the Russians. Instead, they're claiming the Russians did. I would have to say I actually believe it to be true, at least in my opinion. And so with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says, Zelensky clarified that he does not plan to launch an offensive on Russian soil, and what are your thoughts? And this was a response to a report that came out also from the Discord leaks the other day, that behind closed doors, Zelensky was proposing to take Russian border villages and to also launch long-range missiles into the Russian mainland. And today he refuted that. So 80% said that's smart and a strategic decision, 6% said unsure, 11% said I'm mixed on it, and 3% said that's a bad decision and weak. And I'm with the 80% for sure. I think that's smart and strategic. While it would feel good to launch some missiles right back at the Kremlin, that wouldn't be wise for the overall situation in the war. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, in my opinion, I think that's a smart decision to make, not to attack the Russian mainland. Because once again, we always have to remember, right now, the war in Ukraine is a detached thing for the Russians. And while people support the war, for the most part, from what we understand, they don't really care about it that much. It's not a matter of survival, at least for them right now. And so if they end up doing poorly in the war like they are right now, it's not really that big of a deal. However, the Ukrainians start pushing across the border, and I think they actually could, towards places like Belgrade, Kursk, or Bryansk, and that could cause the Russian public to freak out. because now it looks like the Russian mainland's being invaded. Instead of this war being a war of an offensive for the Russians, where they still think they're trying to beat the Ukrainians, it becomes a war of survival, not just from the Russian public's perspective, but from the government's perspective as well, because at that point, everything would be in complete chaos. A lot of things would probably be in absolute disarray, and now the Russians would have the ability to mass mobilize their population. Of course, I'm not saying that that means that the Russians would become like this all-powerful, unstoppable being. They probably still would get a great run for their money, but a lot more bodies would be put into units to just be sent in as cannon fodder, and they would be able to justify it because now, instead of it being an offensive war against the Ukrainians, they're fighting for what appears to be their survival, and at least that's how it would be marketed to the public. And so I think it is a great idea for the Ukrainians not to try and take villages or towns or even oblasts along the Russian border, because I believe that would probably produce very disastrous results. Really, honestly, that is the only situation where I could seriously see the Russians trying to use nuclear weapons against Ukraine, because then they would say that it's under the guise of national defense because their sovereignty is being compromised. So with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well, and I honestly think, along with the large majority of y'all, it is a smart move. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and that was our last poll, so we're moving into our live chat questions. We'll take 3 of them, and also, if you have a question for us, please tag @EnforcerMatt in the chat and send me your message. And remember that tonight, there are no super chats, so you don't have to pay to get your question answered. You just send it to us, and we'll add it to the spreadsheet. But up first, we have our Morse code coders of the stream, which is Mark Hodges, C-Fay, JP's Gone Fishing, Cliff Simonson, and Earl Bernew. They said tonight's Morse code message says, the Russians are on that route that leads them to the route that brings them to the bout of the problem that lies throughout Russia. That was a slow ding, 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 ding.
And that was a slow ding, ding, ding. And I gotta say, don't ding your dong on this, as all the Taco Bell entrances say.
Oh,
and on top of that, you got the Morse code message correct. That was the right one. I didn't really have a good one to come up with tonight, so I just figured, why not make everything rhyme in the Morse code message? But y'all did get that correct, and congratulations once again for reading that Morse code message, because that one was so long, I actually had to go and speed it up, so that way it could fit in within the sirens. And so with that, thank y'all for deciphering the Morse code message once again, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to JDR24, who says, Enforcer, do you think we're past stage 3 of the stages of the counteroffensive?
I gotta be honest with you, I don't think we are. What we're seeing in Bakhmut, I feel, is smaller actions. And while we're seeing that, and once again, I have to say this, when we say that massive gains are being made, this is not on a normal wars scale, this is on a Bakhmut scale. And so what would be a massive gain in Bakhmut would be considered a small gain in the large majority of the war. But considering that it took the Russians 8 months to get to where they are in their frontline positions, and the Ukrainians were reversing nearly 3 months of effort in a single day, relative to the Russian speed, it is a massive movement and a massive gain for them. But in the large part, it is still somewhat small. And we're also seeing that while Ukrainian units are blowing the Russians away, not a large amount of Ukrainian units appear to be involved in these offensive actions. It appears to maybe be 2 brigades worth of forces, but that is nowhere near the bulk of the Ukrainian army, or even their most advanced units. So I would have to say I don't think we're seeing stage 4 occurring yet. I think we're still within stage 3. And so with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well. And I think we are on to the final one of this segment.
All right, and the excuse me. The
Dang,
last one of the
bro.
segment goes to Todd Abbott. Slowly dying over here. But Todd says, do you think that Russia intentionally leaked the docs to weaken Prighozin or reduce his popularity?
I don't think, and he's talking about the Thug Shaker Central docs.
Yeah, and that was from the National Guard, allegedly.
I would say no, because those documents that were being released by Jack the Dripper on Thug Shaker Central were entirely from Jack the Dripper and from supposedly U.S. intelligence reports and documents pertaining to that. So if the Russians deliberately leaked those documents, that means the Russians would have control over Department of Defense intelligence and documents, and I would feel like that would be pretty hard-pressed to say that they would, considering that they don't even have control over their own Ministry of Defense and the mercenaries that are hired under the Ministry of Defense in Russia. So I would have to say no. That probably just came out from Jack the Dripper on Thug Shaker Central. And what's even funnier about Jack the Dripper on Thug Shaker Central is that Jack the Dripper on Thug Shaker Central did all of that not even because, and from what I understand, the story goes, he didn't even really have an affiliation to either side in this war, if I'm correct, Matthew. He was just putting those out there to win internet arguments on this Discord channel.
That's what I read. He just did it basically for clout.
Dude, that is literally what everyone on War Thunder does. You know, like whenever anyone sits there and goes, man, the Challenger 2 couldn't survive a hit like that, and some British guy says, oh, really, brother? And then he just puts out the Challenger 2 manual online that shows the exact armor values that it has, and everyone's like, where'd you get that? And then the Ministry of Defense is
it would have honestly seemed less. It would have seemed less stupid if he would have simply had a reason to do it instead of literally no reason.
I know that it was such a stupid thing. This guy is just releasing every single document he can to win arguments. It's goofy, really. And sadly, for some reason, there are goofy people like that all around the world. Because if you play a game, and I'll just give a little bit of an explanation behind this, because some people are like, "Why in the hell is this video game always brought up on this channel?" There is a free-to-play online video game, and I'll show y'all it real quick, called War Thunder, that has a lot of historical vehicles displayed within the game. So here's their website real quick. I'll show y'all this so that way I can explain it a little bit better. So they have just about everything in here, and they're currently going through a new update, so, you know, they're adding new stuff, like this F-14B Tomcat. The thing is that when they add aircraft like this, they add them and they try and balance them so that way it's fun to play against them. Of course, many War Thunder players will tell you it's never fun to play this game, and they're probably right, because, you know, sometimes I wonder why in the world I'm playing this game. Anyways, people who used to fly these jets, for some reason, will always just have classified documents laying around somewhere, and whenever someone says that the plane is accurately displayed in the game, they just release classified documents about these aircraft. This has happened multiple times. It's happened in China with the ZTZ-99. It's happened in Russia over the T-90M and also the MiG-29. And it's also happened here in the United States, I believe, with the M1 Abrams on several occasions, and even the F-15EX Strike Eagle. It's happened multiple times. It's happened in Britain, France, Germany. It's happened everywhere. This game is honestly weird with how many times people just leak classified documents about stuff. But that really falls under the same category. What happened on Thug Shaker Central is almost like what happens with that video game on a regular basis. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on.
Isn't that kind of weird? Isn't that kind of weird how there's this long, drawn-out process to get a security clearance? They go through all these steps that are supposedly bulletproof to ensure that somebody is legitimate before they give them the clearance, and then this kind of stuff happens.
I know, it's just like the whole security clearance thing is honestly a joke. Because I also got interviewed because someone I knew was entering the armed forces. They had to get a security clearance, and so they put me as one of their references, and they called me up and they said, so we just want a couple of quick questions with you. And the questions were stuff like this. So was he a nice kid when he was in high school with you? It's like, what type of questions are these? It's like, yeah, he was nice. Yeah, we were good friends. Yeah, we would hang out every once in a while. Yeah, all right, thanks. It's like that. It's like, there's no way to check to see if someone is, like, mentally stable or not. Honestly, I feel like you ought to get a security clearance after, like, a superior observes you for a while and notices that you're of, like, good character or something like that. I feel like that would be a better way to give out security clearance than just randomly asking random people in the normal world whether they liked someone or not. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from the question segment and on into the news, because we've got to get into Bakhmut. And starting off in the northeast, and we haven't actually, real quick, let me move up here and show you all the past 24 hours up here. We, of course, have not seen any movement whatsoever in the northeast. I have to make that clear. And starting off with our first clip, we saw that the 5th Brigade in this area was blowing up some Russian ammo. Dang, man, they got the Titanic music up in this thing. And we can see the Russian ammo depot right there on the side of the road. Once again, the organization of Russian ammunition is incredible. You just sort of want. And now we can see that this organization is coming back to bite them, as all of it's catching on fire and exploding and just flying everywhere. We can now see the ammo depot continuing to burn. It appears that the fire has also spread into the street. And this video is really choppy. I don't know if it's our internet or if it's the video. And let me see which it is.
It's the internet.
It's no, actually, this is the video. The video's just choppy. I don't really know why, but we can see it continuing to burn on into the night, and that's the end of the clip. But of course, oh, it is actually the internet. Oh, oh,
It is.
oh, we're lagging. Man, we lagging. But with that, that's the end of that clip, and it's great to see that the 5th Brigade was able to destroy that Russian ammunition store. Also, once again, I hate to say this, but we are going through internet outages or something similar. We can't really tell, of course, because it may be a DDoS attack, it may be the internet, we don't really know. So please bear with us during this, because sadly we don't really have a lot of control over this stuff. We have upgraded and secured our internet as best as we can. We have done absolutely everything to make sure that we do not have problems with lag or DDoS attacks, and yet sometimes we still do. And so I please ask that y'all bear with us, and if it is a DDoS attack, I ask that y'all stick with us, so that way we can spite the bots. You know what, Matthew says we're going through lag, we gotta do it. Russian Wojak.
Oh, I want the Wojak.
Wait a minute, Russian crying Wojak. We have to get the right one.
We got him on Twitter, you know.
We do?
We do. We do. We have him on Twitter.
Let's go get him.
What air defense doing, though?
What that air defense doing, though?
Peter, my Twitter's here.
Just 3 more days, man. But let's see here. Let's go down here. Man, everything's loading slow right now. And let's scroll on down.
You'll see him. He stands like a sore thumb.
Ah, here he is. Ah,
There it is.
look at him, fella. Ah. Let's say, let me shrink him down. Just 3 more days, Papa. Just 3 more days. 1 second. There we go. And we'll keep that for later. And so with that, the lag's cleared up, thankfully, and we're now moving on to our next clip near the Torski area, where we saw a group of Polish T-72Ms that have now entered the armed forces of Ukraine, rolling through the countryside in the area, and also rolling through a field of flowers, which is really pretty. And so here's the clip. If it loads. And here we go.
Сегодня в бой идут одни старики.
Okay, it's music. We're going to have to mute that, but we see them driving through the field of flowers right here, and it is very nice. And we see them having a fun time here. We can actually see, what's his name? Angry Cops? Apparently he's in the armed forces of Ukraine. Interesting to see. And so with that, that's the end of this clip, but I have to say, honestly, moving on from it being great to see Polish T-72Ms in the Ukrainian army, it is also such a beautiful place that they're driving through. Like, the rolling hills, the fields of flowers. I don't even know what kind of flowers those are. But all of it sums up to be a beautiful day. And what a beautiful day to push the Russians back clean out of the country. So that way, these fields can be enjoyed for the rest of all time, probably. And so with that, we're going to be moving on out of the northeastern area and on to the area of Berestove, where we saw that a kamikaze drone was able to set a nice ammo fire. A nice, warm ammo fire. Fit for a king, fit for a queen, maybe even fit for a dictator. And when you hear the music, just absolutely a vibe. And when you see it running into the ammo warehouse, and we now see footage from a drone further away as it flies in. And we now see the explosion right
that's
there.
Some damage.
Man, like in the words of what in the world's that guy, man? Phil Swift. That's a lot of damage. And so that's the end of the clip. And it's great to see that the FPV drone was able to cause a lot of damage. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on down into Bakhmut, and now it's time for the real fun. Make sure we go to yesterday so that way y'all can get the full impact of what's happened. So, to summarize the front lines over the past few days, and we'll actually be going back to the very beginning of this Ukrainian counteroffensive, which was just a few days ago on the 11th of May, we saw that the front lines were shaped similar to this. The Russian forces were near the highway perimeter, and they were also moving down the western ridgeline towards the south into the area of Ramove. The situation was looking incredibly difficult, and although Ukrainian forces in the center, inside of the city, have been able to regain multiple city blocks in a small push within the city, the situation on the flanks was looking rough. Until what could only be described as a miracle happened, the Ukrainian forces began to push forward on both the northern flank and the southern flank of the city. most notably on the southern flank, where the 3rd Brigade, along with the 93rd, as well as elements of the Terror Unit, began an offensive against the 72nd. Once hitting the lines, the 72nd practically started to disintegrate in the areas that it had been put into contact with, and they began to withdraw from the lines rather quickly. This was what had happened by the next 24 hours, at least according to Deep State UA. Most importantly, Ukrainian forces were regaining ground near the highway perimeter, which we have called this the highway perimeter over the course of the war. This was the most strenuous and difficult situation that we'd seen Ukrainian forces dealing with, as this directly affected the ability of the Ukrainian armed forces to bring supplies into the city to keep the garrison and defenders that were right here running. And so this was the most difficult area, and seeing the Russians get moved right back off of it meant that there was a lot of pressure that had been taken off of the forces within the center, fighting inside the city. Over the next 24 hours, into the 12th of May, we saw that a massive breakthrough had been made just in the north by, at the moment, largely unidentified Ukrainian units. It appears that there is a lot less information about this northern offensive than there is the southern offensive, but once again, the 72nd Brigade the next day continued to fold. They didn't appear to be slowing down in their retreat, and it appears that the Ukrainians have been making some pretty consistent and gradual progress against them. We can also see a notable shape being formed right here. We can see the Ukrainian forces were pushing down the country road from Ivanivsky and also across the Canal Zone area towards Klishkivka, both combined, and it appeared that the Russian forces, in their largest concentration here in this northern bulge, were about to be cut off and encircled. And so from the 12th to the 13th, we saw once again the Ukrainians moving towards that direction, and we can see that they are gaining a large amount of ground and threatening the rear direction of this bulge where the large amount of Russian forces were found within this forested tree line. Today we saw that because of that, Russian forces have routed from this area. Wait, hang on, correction, we have one more update on the 13th where the Ukrainians once again were blowing through Russian lines up here and retaking ground. And so now moving on into the 14th, we can see that they are withdrawing just about everywhere. So the Russian force, I was waiting for Matt to go, dang, but anyways, the Russian forces...
There's lag, by the way.
Oh, no big deal, no big deal. We're going through a good bit of lag. But it is amazing because this is about the size of both of these advances that the Ukrainians have been making both on the northern and western side of the Russian lines, and they've gained that within a single day. On top of that, the Russians lost their only defensible position in this area. As you can see, this was the forested tree line that the Russians have been known to be fighting for an incredibly long time. And way back early on in the battle, this tree line was what gave the Russians the ability to move so close to the highway perimeter and then create the perimeter we saw just until about 4 days ago. We don't see that anymore. Right now, the Russians only hold the fields in between them and Klishkivka, and this gives the Ukrainians a massive advantage. Let me take y'all to there on satellite. So what the Russians and the Ukrainians were fighting over, at least for a while, was this area right here, this tree line near the highway perimeter. This gave the Russians enough concealment that Ukrainians weren't able to blow them away in the wide open air, and so they were able to fight in this area. But now that they've been pushed out of it clearly, as we can see here, there isn't a lot of cover left for Russian forces to operate in. They're now stuck in these massive open fields where there really is no place for the infantry to survive. And considering that the Russians have largely run out of armor and they were now relying entirely on their infantry, this means that this area of the Russian lines will most likely collapse and they will be pushed back to Klishkivka within maybe a day, maybe 2 days. Because there's no way that they can hold this area. It's far too open, there's no places to hide, and the Ukrainians are using a large amount of armor to advance. Armor operates well in the fields, and there are no Russians left in the tree line to even try and counter the Ukrainian armored pushes that are happening within these open fields just south of Bakhmut. So the southern flank is completely collapsing right now, and it is a terrible situation for the Russians. Meanwhile, in the northern flank, we have seen that they have continued to push the Russians back, and it appears that the Ukrainians may be reaching Yahidne or Berkivka by the next few days, maybe the next week. Compared to the progress that it took for the Russians to make this ground, the Ukrainians have already thwarted nearly 3 months of effort by Russian forces in the past 4 days. And so it's been absolutely amazing, and the video footage shows that as well. And so starting off with our first clip, in the most northern area of the front, near Soledar, we saw a drunk Russian climbing out of a trench. I'm not going to be reading the subtitles, I'm going to let y'all read them on this one because they're a little interesting, but here's the clip. We can also hear them playing the Russian rave song.
Туда, блядь, блядь, пьяно нахуй. Туда граната уебала с того, с дрона, блядь. Эй, сука, ёпта,
I mean, you see him just stumbling around. And we're also going to mute that because I don't know if it's copyrighted or not. But he's stumbling around. And nobody really knows where he's going. He's now fallen over. Because he literally just walked right in front of a Ukrainian soldier. And he got it. So, to reiterate this again. Drunk Russian climbs out of Russian trench. Walks up to Ukrainian trench. Gets blasted. That's it. Remember, kids, it's never a good idea to be plastered in the middle of a war zone. It's just not, because nobody is going to sit there and take you home. They're going to send you back home in a casket. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from that clip and on to our next one, where we saw that a Russian Mobic unit in the area has no ammo. And they've also been attached to the Wagner PMC, which is also something that apparently they didn't agree to. And so with that, here's the clip. Good afternoon, everyone. We are mobilized volunteers, mobilized on a agenda. We came to defend our homeland. We got into the 347th OSB. We came from Voslianovsk in the regiment number 29, number 882. Due to the attitude of our commanders, the fact that we are thrown into the front line without any provisions, supplies, water, there are no evacuations of the wounded either. We refuse to serve in this unit and just want to fight with normal guys and defend our homeland. The company is Chervonka Wagner. I hope the guys will accept us. Victory will be ours. What a goofy statement at the end. They've already screwed him over. They're not giving him water even, or food. And they're going to sit there and go, hopefully they'll just move us over to the next unit. We'll win. No, you're not. You can't even get water, man. What the hell do you think you are? Some kind of a sponge or something? But anyways, from what we can see here, once again, the Russians are doing a little bit of witch magic or voodoo or whatever, just throwing people around wherever. So these guys who were supposed to be in the Russian army have now ended up as a part of the Wagner unit, and they're not being provided any ammunition or anything for that matter, and the unit is now asking to be brought under normal Russian army command. They don't understand it. That kind of question will get them a sledgehammer to the head. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from that clip and on to the next one down near Berkivka, where we saw the Ukrainians firing at the Russians near Bakhmut with a ZSU-23 that was mounted on top of an MT-LB. And so here's the clip. You see them firing off into the distance. And now you see the MT-LB scooting on its way. A true drive-by shooting. About as good as they get.
Sounds like an old Chevy.
Dude, this thing sounds like a chopper, man. Like a Harley-Davidson chopper. Listen to this thing.
All right, Ivan. Start up the Silverado, Ivan.
Start up the two-stroke. We gotta get out of here. but dang, man. I mean, like, that is... Honestly, though, I like the noise. I like the sound that that engine makes. That's not a bad sound at all. But still, pretty nice to see the Ukrainians laying down the fire on the Russians, and that kind of fire is what's helping them to continue to push the Russians on out of the area. We're now going to be moving down into our next clip, where we also saw the remains of an unfortunate VAB that apparently had been hit and burned out way early on in the battle. And we can see them showing their burned out VAB right here. The VAB is a French-supplied armored personnel carrier. It is incredibly thinly armored, about as thinly armored as an M113 or an MTLB, and so the fact that it got hit and didn't survive is not all that shocking. It is unfortunate to see, however, that the Ukrainians did lose one of the French-donated armored personnel carriers. With that, that's the end of the clip, but once again, while the Ukrainians may have lost that VAB, Russian, I guess you could say, conditions on the front lines are certainly not fabulous, as they continue to be hit and pushed back in the Bakhmut area. In fact, 2 commanders were killed today that were in charge of Russian forces. And let me make sure I read this off correctly to get the names and positions correct. The commander of the 4th Motorized Rifle Brigade, Colonel Vyacheslav Makarov, was killed today, along with Colonel Yevgeny Brovko, who was in charge of the, well, actually, he was the deputy commander of the Army Corps, which is pretty much in charge of the entire area of that part of the theater. Yevgeny Brovko, the commander of the entire area, and also the commander of the 4th Motorized Rifle Brigade, Colonel Vyacheslav Makarov, were killed today. This was also corroborated while we only have the caption right here on Reddit. I did find that this was corroborated today by the Russian Ministry of Defense, and it appears that they have lost 2 incredibly important commanders within this part of the front line. And once again, this will only help to rapidly accelerate the decay and loss of territory that the Russians have fought 8 months to gain. These commanders are incredibly important, and while some people always want to say, you know, it's not that important to lose a commander at a colonel level or a general level. It's incredibly important. These people had a concept or an image in their head of how this battle was unfolding. And this guy got killed, meaning that another guy whose job it was not to look at the war or the battle in such a grand scale will now be moved up to that position in the middle of them losing the battle and have to be brought up to speed about what is happening or figure out what is happening, or they're going to bring in a commander for both of these positions that has absolutely no idea what's going on the battlefield, and he's not going to understand the limitations or the abilities of the Russian forces that he'll be taking command of. And so this is seriously hindering Russian efforts in the area, and it is amazing to see that somehow the Ukrainians were able to take out 2 high commanders today of this area of the battlefield. With that, we're going to be moving back into the city where we saw that a Ukrainian unit had a very close call with an artillery shell. Luckily, nobody was wounded or killed in this video, but the shell landed right outside the building and filled the rest of it with smoke. And so here's the clip. When you see the Ukrainian soldier looking outside, we see another one looking outside as well. The camera is covered with something for a second. The shell explodes, and everyone's covered with dust, and we can now see them moving down the stairs and on into the basement to make sure that if there's another shell, they do not get blasted. We now see them moving, and it appears that they've made it out into the open, and they're running from that building and on to another one. But the entire area is filled with smoke. We can see one guy trip over some rubble that he couldn't see because of the smoke. And they're now moving into the next building and on into a basement as well. Well, that's the end of that clip, but once again showing that while the Ukrainians are still fighting tooth and nail for Bakhmut, it is a pretty difficult battle down there. With that, we're going to be moving on from the center of the city and on further south, specifically towards Velesna Dolnya, which is behind the lines and in Russian-occupied area, where we saw that several Russian artillery pieces were destroyed by FPV drones today. And so with that, here's the clip. We can hear the music, and let me make sure real quick. Let's see. Several kamikaze drone hits on SPGs and MLRS systems. So we can see the first one hit. And we can see the artillery system brewing up. We can't really tell what kind it was. We now see the system exploding. We see white ammo, white smoke billowing out, showing that it was an ammunition explosion. I think that is the same one from another angle, can't really tell. We now see another one coming in. And this appears to be... I can't even tell what that is. That kind of looks like a Panzerhaubitze. And when you see something go up inside of it, and we now see a fire burning. It appears that the entire crew is bailed. We can see 5 people running from the SPG. And we now see the ammo beginning to slowly burn out the vehicle. In the next clip, we can see another drone coming in on another position, this time near a small village. And I couldn't really tell you what that one was. That one flew in so quickly you couldn't even really see it. But it appears to have hit the rearward part of the SPG once again. We now see another one coming in. This time hitting another unidentified piece. Couldn't really tell what it was.
That was pretty impressive how they changed, like, its targeting, like, at the last second.
Yeah, that was pretty impressive. Moving on into the next one, we can see another drone flying in on another artillery piece. And this one appears to be... Let me hang on. This one appears to be... I can't really tell what that is. It kind of looks like a Panzerhaubitze again.
Yeah, it kind of does.
When you see it hit, and we see the smoke billowing off of the SPG, and we didn't see it explode, and it appears that they cut off from that one. We now see another drone coming in. And this appears to be, I couldn't even tell what that one was. And it appears that the drone is flying in and hitting. And once again, and real quick, I've actually realized this real quick, everyone. This is actually a Russian compilation of their drones hitting Ukrainian artillery in the area. And if you notice, they've only shown one go up in flames, and it was the single Panzerhaubitze 2000 that was hit by a Lancet with its rearward door open. The crew bailed out, but of course the Panzerhaubitze was lost. Every other clip that they show, these things are hitting the SPGs, but they're not blowing them up. They're just giving them a little ding, you know, where they hear boom on the inside of the tank, and then that's it. And so they're not really showing it a lot. And now we can see what appears to be a Vampire MLRS, and we see the drone coming in on it.
Oh, dear.
This one is most likely not going to end too well. We can see it hit, and we can now see the MLRS rockets exploding inside of their tubes, and now the solid propellant is detonating. You now see it exploding.
Like most of them were able to get out of there in time.
Yeah, it looks like almost the entire group was able to get out of there in time. The burning was quite slow. We can now see this one hitting what appears to be an ammunition storage for an artillery piece. No, that once again looks like an MLRS. It is an MLRS. And with that, that is the end of the clip. And it appears that while the Russians were able to destroy several MLRSs and a Panzerhaubitze 2000, they were not able to destroy the other two Panzerhaubitze 2000s that were shown in the video. And once again, well, also I'm going to have to move that over here now that we know it is a Russian video for sure. And it is fairly interesting to see that they are able to get maybe one hit here or there, but still, they're getting plastered. And so with that, we're going to be moving on to the next clip near Klishkivka, where we saw that the 45th Artillery Brigade continued to hit Russian open-air ammunition stores around the area. And so here's the clip. And we're going to have to mute that, but we can see the Russians running up to a D-20 artillery piece. And we now see the 45th preparing to lob a shell right at the D-20. We can once again see the D-20's position right there, and the first shell lands dead on, causing a rapid ammo detonation and also destroying the artillery piece. We can now see another artillery shell exploding a little bit farther behind and hitting the other D-20 that was located a little bit farther behind the house, while a small nuclear bomb goes off in the house in front of it that was holding all of the ammunition for the battery. We can now see the ammunition continuing to burn and also the contents of the house burning as well. And now we can see the ammunition exploding once again, billowing out white smoke, but the house continues to burn. We now see that they slowed down the footage, which tells us one of two things. Either the video is ending, which it was, or it was about to turn into a nuclear explosion. Well, that is the end of that clip, but once again, very nice to see that the 45th Artillery Brigade is blowing away the ammunition that the Russians have near the front lines, and also their artillery batteries as well. With that, we're moving on to the next clip, where we also saw a Russian tank destroyed somewhere near the front lines in the southern area today. And it appears that this one, and making sure to read this correctly, this was the 128th TD Battalion of the 112th TD Brigade. The tank was destroyed by soldiers of the 5th Assault Brigade with a javelin in the Bakhmut direction. And so we see the Russian tank on the move down this road. We can see it's skirting along a trench line. And we can now see what appears to be the tank firing at Ukrainian positions. We now see the tank moving off the road and through an open field. And once again, further down the street, we see it moving as sporadic artillery shell lands here and there. And we can now see it right there moving along the field, and it appears to have just been hit by the javelin, I believe. It has now come to a stop. It's now moving off the road and back onto the road and continuing on. We now see another artillery shell exploding. We can see the tank still moving on down this road, and we can see it get hit a second time, this time much more damaging, causing a fire in the engine bay, and we can see this at night. And it appears that there's also a little bit of fire coming out of the turret as well, showing that the tank is brewing up. Well, that's the end of the clip, but a huge credit to the Atom unit that was able to destroy that tank in the southern area of the direction of Bakhmut. We're now going to be moving on into our next clip, where we also saw that the Ukrainians were able to capture a little bit more Wagner gear. We saw right here that they were able to get a Russian patch with a Z on it. I guess you could say that the guy who had that patch is now sleeping Zs, but not the kind of peaceful Zs. Moving on to the next picture, we can also see that they got a Polaroid picture from one of the soldiers that was in this position. A load of cheap Pro Mags that I also have for my AK, and they also caught an AK-74 over here, and a Russian helmet that had a Z painted onto it. Lastly, it appears... This appears to maybe be radio frequencies. Let's see what it says. Let me see here. Also, wait a minute. Hang on. Kozmin. Let's see. Kremenka. BMP. Oh, wait a minute. Yep. BMP. No, wait a minute, hang on. This thing is actually giving off coordinates and directions of armored vehicles that were in the area, so if they needed support, they could call on them. So now the Ukrainians have a spreadsheet, it appears, of 11 different vehicles that are in the vicinity that this unit could call on for support, including what is most likely an OSA anti-air system, which approximately costs around $10 million. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that interesting little bit of news. It appears that the Russians will be losing quite a large amount of vehicles if those coordinates are accurate. And moving on to the next bit of news, we saw that a Wagner prisoner had been captured today by Ukrainian forces continuing their advance in this direction, and it appears that he is also not a big fan of the war. And so with that, here's the clip. And also, I'll make sure to read off the captions. I'm sending my greetings to the Telegram channel. They say that we are snipers. Donated to the ZSU, Ukraine's armed forces, so that we don't come here anymore. Do you want to send something to your relatives? I'm sending greetings to my relatives and friends. Your son, your husband, who is he to you? Is everything okay with him? Yes. We will provide first aid when we will leave the position. He has a leg. Everything will be fine. We will feed him, drink him. You'll live according to the rules. Until the meat is changed. Goodbye to the new Russians. And so with that, that's the end of the clip. When you see the Ukrainians are treating this guy pretty civilly, actually. And also they'll be taking him back to a prisoner of war filtration center to then send him to a POW camp a little while later. With that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news and on up towards the highway perimeter itself, where we saw an M113 driving into Bakhmut today. And we're going to have to mute it because there's music playing in the background. But we can see Bakhmut out there, smoke billowing out of the city. And interestingly enough, Matthew, I've noticed that our highway into Bakhmut went from being a paved two-way road to now it's just a massive dirt highway.
Are you trying to say the road has changed, or is it like been reduced to dirt?
I think it's been reduced to dirt just by the amount of road traffic that's traveled over it, and also to the amount of shelling and everything else. Because at the beginning of the war, we used to always see the paved two-way road, and now it's completely disappeared, either under mud that's been tracked onto the road, or the road has just been so thoroughly destroyed or so thoroughly used by tracked vehicles that it's practically disappeared. But still, with that, we're going to be moving on.
Let's see that front part of the video again.
Here it is. Well, you see them driving, and they're going to pan over to the
I'll be honest, this looks almost like a completely different road.
let me see.
I mean, the landscape looks very flat and much different. The other thing had like a ditch going along the side of it.
Let's see here. Let me take a look at this. So they're looking at Bakhmut this way. Is there any identifying landmarks? Well, we might want to. We're not going to do that actually for OPSEC reasons because I tried to locate where it was. I go, look, they're driving right here. But anyways, with that, we're going to be moving on from that clip, but once again showing the drive into Bakhmut. We're going to take that off of the T-0504 because it is a little questionable. It doesn't look like the T-0504 any longer, and we're going to be moving it up into the middle in between the Hromove Road and also the T-0504 because we can't really tell which one it is. With that, we're going to be moving on further back behind the line where we saw a kamikaze drone destroy some... Wait a minute. This is a duplicate. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from the duplicate and also deleting it as well so that we don't have the duplicate around. And with that, we can see that in the Bakhmut area, Ukrainian forces are still driving home a massive offensive against the Russians, at least massive compared to the Russian scale of a massive offensive these days, and they've been able to take a massive amount of ground here in the south, pushing the Russians back towards the village of Klishkivka, and they're also pushing the Russians in the north back towards Berkivka and Yahitne. Massive gains, especially compared to what the Russians have been able to do over the past 8 months, and certainly going to be leading to the Russians freaking out in the center. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news and down towards the area of Orlivka, where we saw the Ukrainians firing a French heavy mortar. And so here's the clip. And you see them hanging in the round, and now firing it.
Oh.
And we're waiting. We now see them adjusting. Making sure that everything is just right. And now they will fire.
Boof.
Dang, dude, that didn't sound like an explosion. That just sounded like someone doing that little glass harmonica thing, you know, like where it goes woo. But still, with that, that's the end of the clip, and great to see that the Ukrainians are using those French heavy mortars. With that, we're going to be moving on further down the line and into the area of Novobakhmukivka, where we saw some geese had joined the Ukrainian army. And without further ado, here's the clip. Man, I'm telling you, man, these geese be goosing it. And so here's the clip. You see him going forward, and we can now see the geese have volunteered to join the Ukrainian army. They are following the soldiers forward, and they'll be making sure to bring their suppressive firepower, which is their incredibly painful and stinging little nip of their beak, to the battlefield. We now see them continuing to carry on forward as the geese follow.
If that was the Russians that saw the geese, that would be dinner, baby.
Dude, the Russians would be going, oh, look, what are going to eat? And the Ukrainians are just here literally 20 yards away from them. Bah, 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 and then they just start shooting at where the gunfire is coming from. But with that...
You know, when your pets start looking like food, that tells you a lot about the shape of your military.
Man, I'm telling you, man. And you know how the saying goes, Matthew. Everything is food. Every animal is food. It just depends on how bad the economic crisis is. And for the Russians, horse meat is now on the menu. We're now going to be moving on out of Novobakhmukivka and down on into the area of Karlivka, where we saw a Ukrainian Su-25 in flight. And so, without further ado, here's the clip. Also, we're going to have to mute it. And so, here's the Su-25 flying over the fields. I gotta say, the Su-25s that the Ukrainians have, once again, like every other aircraft they have, has a sick camouflage. I really like the, multicolor, grayscale camouflage that they have. It looks good. Bossing, to say the least. When you see the Su-25 continuing to fly over the fields, we can see that it has rocket pods mounted onto it, meaning that it'll be doing a fire support mission. When you see that there's a rainstorm in front of them, it doesn't appear to be a thunderstorm.
That's that storm that Reznikov was talking about.
Yeah, watch out for the shadow bleed. And we see them flying over a village right there. And we can see the rain hitting the camera. And the Su-25 continuing to trudge forward. Honestly, man, this looks a lot like Western England.
It does.
Kind
I
of
wonder
like,
how fast this guy's going. Is this like close to full throttle? Because he's booking it.
I think this thing's probably going about 500 or so miles an hour. An SU-25 at its top speed can only go about 620 miles per hour, so it is probably going around in the 560s, 570s most likely. Well, you see that he's nearly made it out of the rainstorm, and he's continuing to fly on his way. See him flying over a small road down there and almost hitting that tower. That kind of freaked me out. I didn't see that until the last second. I was like, whoa. I was like, whoa. That was close. And you see him continuing to fly onwards. Just giving us a good look at the scenery around Ukraine. We could see that there were sporadic rainstorms whenever this video was taken. I mean, you see him flying on towards the next rainstorm. Not really sure if he's picking him out for a specific reason or if they're all just following along his flight path. We now see him flying through the next rainstorm.
You know you're going fast when you go through 2 rainstorms.
Man, I'm telling you, man, it looks like he's already lining up for the third. You can see the third one out there in the distance. I don't know if this guy is just picking out the rainstorms or what, but it is very nice to see this guy flying this jet. I wish I could fly aircraft like this, and we can now see him tilting up to fire off his rockets, and we now see him firing off the rockets right there, making a hard left, most likely popping off chaff and flares, and getting his way on out of there. Really nice to see, and just a really neat video overall. We're now going to be moving further on down and into the area of Staromykivka, or Staromykhalivka, there we go, where we saw some Ukrainian helicopters passing over the ground forces below. And we see the Mi-24 flying over. And now we can see an Mi-8 following up close behind. Look at that. So nice. I like it. Dude, I still think the Mi-8 looks goofy, but still great to see the Ukrainian helicopters in action. I honestly feel like we need to start a movement to get Mi-8s replaced by Blackhawks or some other kind of Western helicopter, because I just don't really like the Mi-8s at all. And so with that,
they look pretty robust and, you know, durable. I mean, they're not the sexiest looking plane in the world, or a helicopter, but they work.
Hey, who said I was wanting to have sex with the helicopters, man? Jeez, back it up. But anyway, said that we're gonna be moving on to Marinka, where we saw. We're gonna be moving on to Marinka, where we saw the city still once again today. Marinka has to be one of the most photographed cities at this point, but it's also the most photographed because it's been the most thoroughly destroyed. It is truly a ruin of a battlefield, and yet the Ukrainians still hold the ground in this area, making sure to not yield an inch to Russian forces, and that is also the reason why the town looks like this. Many of y'all may be also wondering what's up with the oddly shaped hills that are around the area of Marinka, and those were actually caused by mining during the Soviet era. These are nothing more than slag and rubble heaps of all of the stone and everything else that they pulled out of the mines, and they would just pile up around the city. And so they aren't actually mountains, they're actually little heaps. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from the town of Marinka and further on down into the southern front, where we saw near Staromykivka that a Ural was destroyed at close range by Ukrainian rifle fire. And so without further ado, here's the video. This one is pretty funny. You see this guy unloading his AK into the Ural, and then it just blows up. Wait
a minute, did they rig it with something, or did it have something already in it?
I don't know, because this guy just shot at it like this. and it blew up like a Michael Bay movie. I don't know what's up with this.
Michael Bay, is that you out there?
Michael Bay? Hey, get away from me. Or whatever the hell Michael
Steven
Bay is.
Seagal's head pops around the corner. Hello?
Hey man, I'd love to make a movie. But anyways, beyond that, nothing else happened in the Southern Front today rather than that guy blowing up that Euro 4320 with his AK or some kind of explosive, who really knows. But with that, we've covered all of the news, north to south, east to west, across the entirety of Ukraine, and it's now time for us to move on to the last thing we have to cover before we round out the news segment of tonight's stream. The speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. And so, without further ado, here's the speech from the one, the only, President Volodymyr Zelensky. Also, it is quite a long one. It is 28 minutes long, so we're probably only going to show about 7 minutes of it. But without further ado, here's the speech.
Speech.
Thank you so much. Great honor to be here.
Also, real quick, before we continue on, I'm also going to be turning up the volume because it's really quiet. So, Matthew, make sure not to say anything until I round out the speech, because you'll be blowing out my eardrums if you do. And so, the volume's going up.
Yeah.
The volume's going up right now, and the speech will now begin.
Madam Mayor, Mr. Linden, dear Olaf, dear Ursula, Mateusz, Roberta, dear colleagues, thank you very much. Thank you for your kind words about Ukraine. First of all, about Ukraine and our heroes and our soldiers and our children. Thank you very much. My appreciation. They are real heroes. Thank you so much. Thank you for Europe, which is now finally able to fulfill the dream that was laid at the basis of European unity. It is an honor for me to represent the Ukrainian people today, here, and each day. Millions of people who are fighting, working for our well.
One second, everyone. We're going to be trying to get English subtitles for y'all. I was just asked if we could probably get those, and it appears that the auto-generated ones are Ukrainian, so let me see if I can get ourselves a English one real quick. Let me go over here to subtitles. Let's see. Ukrainian auto-generated. Can we get English? So, here we go. Now we should have some English subtitles, so here we go.
And for our freedom, and for our free Europe. All Ukrainians, each of our heroes deserve.
So unfortunately, everyone, real quick, just once again say this. It appears that I have the subtitles on and we're not getting any subtitles. He is speaking in English. And also there is audio, and I've turned it up about as loud as I can. So with that, we're going to let it continue.
Deserve to stand here and to receive this award. But since the millions of people just will not fit in this hall, let our language, which represents all our people, be spoken here today. The Ukrainian language has never been spoken in these walls by the awardee. And now, when Ukraine is returning to its native European home, I believe that the Ukrainian language will be spoken here on many occasions from now, while recognizing special contribution to the European unity. Ukrainians will always make Europe stronger. Technical, thanks so much. or maybe you began to learn. That's great news. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Усі, хто присутні в цій залі, усі, хто разом з нами захищає свободу Європи. Усі ми більше, ніж лідери і політики, громадські діячі і дипломати. Усі ми є засновниками миру. Саме засновниками миру – це головний наш обов'язок перед нашими країнами, перед нашою Європою та перед нашою історією. Саме мир ми залишимо нашим дітям і онукам як спадщину сьогодення. Ми не маємо і не хочемо інших альтернатив. Але щоб залишити мир у спадщину, ми з вами повинні дійти до того дня, коли зможемо сказати, що ми завершуємо цю війну нашою спільною перемогою. Дорогі європейці, історія будується з перемог, хоч і запам'ятовує і поразки. Бували ілюзії, що нібито можливі інші цеглини для історії, ніж перемоги, але такі ілюзії, вони обертались зникненням або, в ліпшому випадку, багатолітнім мовчанням в історії тих, хто сповідував їх. Ілюзії обертаються смертями. Мир покоління наших батьків – це мир, який їм залишили у спадок ті, хто переміг передостанню велику агресію в Європі. А мир покоління наших з вами дітей – це мир, який ми здобуваємо саме зараз у боях проти останньої агресії в Європі. Бої тривають на відстані понад 2000 кілометрів звідси, від Аахена, на землі України, у нашому небі, у нашому Чорному морі та у європейській долі. Це поле битви, доля Європи. Теперішня Росія пішла агресією не лише проти нас, як вільної, самостійної держави, не лише проти об'єднаної Європи, як глобального символу миру і процвітання. Це війна Росії за минуле. Долаючи кілометри української території, Росія намагалась подолати роки європейської історії нашої із вами, саме тих 73 років, коли тут вручається Карлс Прайс. Ми зіткнулися з агресором, який йде на будь-яку жорстокість та Russians. But we don't afraid. Because we are together. Thank you very much.
So we're going to cut the speech right there because that is a pretty good place to round it out. Of course, it is 28 minutes long. If y'all would like to watch the entirety of it, you can find it on the President of Ukraine's website, or you can find it on our map. Because while I didn't include it, and also when you turn down the volume so that way Matthew can add in whatever he wants without blowing out my eardrums, we will, of course, throw this down right here so that way we have the address from the President here on this day. So let me put it down. Address.
Man, I'm shocked Zelensky didn't bounce around one bit when that bang went off. I thought something was happening.
Dude, I thought he was about to like pull a full like old style thing and go, miss me, or something like that. But anyways, with that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky, at least for us tonight. And that also rounds out our news summary as well. And what a crazy night it's been. We haven't really been able to harp on it much because YouTube is making sure to help us to not harp on it as much as we normally do. But we have raised $9,167. in support of Ukraine. And it is unbelievable to think that once again, on another Sunday fundraiser, not only did we get over the goal in literally the first minute of the stream, but we got all the way up to nearly $10,000 raised in support of Ukraine. And I've got to thank everyone so much once again for helping this channel to once again help save the lives of Ukrainians the world over and also help Ukrainian soldiers to have a future after this war. Of course, it is crazy to think that we've been able to do this for 445 days, and I gotta thank all of y'all so much for being with us once again tonight while we set goals and records for the LSA once more. That, I believe, getting past the goal in 1 minute, even beat out the year's anniversary. I believe it took us 2 to 3 minutes to beat out the like $5,000 amount on the year anniversary of the war during that live podcast, and that was unbelievable. I, of course, have to thank everyone who made that possible, especially Mark, Colonel of the LSA, because all of y'all have done massive amounts of efforts in helping to save the lives of folks all over Ukraine. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the question segment for the rest of the night, answering all of the live chats that we have, and also addressing the remainder of our polls. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and the very first poll we have says, Zelensky said today that there is no rational reason why Ukraine is not in NATO yet. And what are your thoughts? 53% said I agree, there is no rational reason. 6% said unsure, 10% said I'm mixed on it, and 32% said I disagree and there is a reason. And I'm going to fall within the 32%. I would have to disagree. Now, we will get into it in a later poll that we have. Technically speaking, he's not incorrect, but in the world of reality and what real consequences will have if that actually happens, it's really not realistic right now at this point. But later on, it can be. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that on the technical level, he is correct. For some reason, someone at the beginning of the war said you can't join NATO while involved in the war. Say what?
Wait, save that. It's a poll.
Oh. Well, anyways, wait a minute, reread that. Reread the line so that way I can make sure that I don't go into other polls and stuff yet.
This one said, Zelensky said today that there is no rational reason why Ukraine is not in NATO, and what are your thoughts?
I would say that there is a somewhat rational reason, is that if they are entered into NATO, it invokes Article 4 and Article 5 immediately, because then they're a NATO member, and we're trying to avoid an outright war with Russia, or as many people call it, a third world war. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says, based on your understanding, is it possible for Ukraine to join NATO while at war with Russia? It looks like 67% said no, the rules don't allow it. 21% said yes, technically they could, and 12% said unsure and undecided. And someone actually mentioned this question to me earlier today, and they were very adamant about their position, so I did a ton of research to figure out if they were accurate. And I was shocked to find out that technically Ukraine can join NATO while they're at war with Russia. There is no rule barring a country in a current dispute from entering NATO. Now, that doesn't mean it might, not be the wisest thing to do or unrealistic, but technically, according to the rules, there's nothing barring it. So the 21% were accurate. I was looking over my Twitter post here to make sure I haven't missed anything. And it looks like I've covered pretty much everything. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that was pretty interesting to hear today as well. Matthew did a large amount of research and also presented it to me, and his information is correct. You can technically join NATO while in the middle of a war, as long as you meet the very abstract requirements they have to be an active NATO member. So technically they could, and I was really surprised to hear that as well, because at the beginning of the war, someone said you couldn't join NATO while in an active war, and everyone kind of ran with it, but technically that's not the case. So with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next poll says, reports indicate that NATO doesn't plan to invite Ukraine to join NATO at the Vilnius summit, which is coming up very shortly, and what are your thoughts? 73% said not shocking and understandable, 6% said unsure, 9% said, what are the reasons, and 13% said that's ridiculous and let Ukraine in NATO. And I'm with the 73%. That's not shocking right now, because if Ukraine were to enter NATO, that would mean the almost immediate triggering of Article 4 and ultimately Article 5. which would basically mean that the U.S. and the rest of the West is going to get into a direct conflict with Russia, which is obviously not a good thing. That's going to probably end up worse than the original situation. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say it is understandable, and I think that we should wait until after the war to make Ukraine a NATO member, because once again, if they do become a NATO member, Article 4 and Article 5 are practically invoked immediately, and there really is no debate or subject as to whether a NATO member will be under attack, considering that Russian forces would be holding an active front line within their national borders. So I think we should wait until after the war to make them a NATO member. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next poll says Russia has moved 16 heavy strategic and nuclear-capable bombers to the border of Finland, and what are your thoughts? 57% said they are trying to menace Finland, 22% said Russia is increasing Ukraine air attacks, 10% said unsure, and 11% said it's nothing and just routine rotation. And I think I'm going to be with the 22%. I think Russia is moving those aircraft there to begin increasing the air attacks that they're conducting, and those bombers can launch cruise missiles. So that's what they've been doing, and that's what they're probably going to keep doing. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that they're probably just trying to menace Finland, because obviously they're not going to attack a, as far as we know, a NATO member. That would obviously be pretty silly to do. So I don't think they would be attacking Finland for any reason. If they menace Finland, they menace the entire Western world, including the United States, and that's something the Russians know they can't really do. It's not really within their ability. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next poll.
All right, and real quick, I did see a comment from the live chat. I don't know, I can't remember who said it. Somebody said that NATO has a lot of requirements. Just wanted to clarify one thing real quick. Technically, there is no checklist to join NATO. NATO has what's called an open door policy, and they have guiding factors that they take into consideration when they get an application from a potential member state. The 5 minimum requirements that the U.S. has laid out is that they must uphold democracy, they have to make progress toward a market economy, the military forces have to be under firm civilian control, they also have to respect sovereignty outside of their borders, and they have to be working toward compatibility with NATO forces. And those are just guiding factors. Those aren't hard and fast rules. So technically, whatever NATO decides and votes on that they will accept, it pretty much goes. There's no hard and fast rules saying this has to be done, that has to be done. That's just simply not the way it works. But Enforcer, I think he has something as well.
Yes, I do. I actually have the U.S. Department of State's archive right here, and this is, according to the Department of State's archive, the checklist that Matthew just read off. And you can even see down here that they continued on. Also, real quick, this is a fact sheet prepared by the Bureau of European and Canadian Affairs in 1997. So this is not just some random thing that came out of thin air. This was actually by a Bureau of European and Canadian Affairs in the Department of State in the United States. And below this checklist, it says, again, while these criteria are essential, they do not constitute a checklist leading automatically to NATO membership. New members must be invited by a consensus of current members. Decisions to invite new members must take into account the required ratification process in the member states. In the case of the United States, decisions are made in consultation with the Congress. The key determinant for any invitation to new members is whether their admission to NATO will strengthen the alliance and further the basic objective of NATO enlargement, which is to increase security and stability across Europe. And so by all of these criteria, we can see that the Ukrainians fill all of them. They uphold democracy, and they include to tolerate diversity. They also are a market economy, much like all of other Western economies. Their military forces are under firm civilian control. The president of Ukraine being a civilian position means that the military is under a very similar control structure to the United States. They also are in good standing with their neighbors, except for Russia, and they are also working towards compatibility with NATO. So while Officer Mr. Thornbury is correct in his idea, audit the audit, Matthew.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Thornbury is correct in his presumption that military forces must be under firm civilian control. However, Ukraine is also liable to join NATO because there is no criteria saying that they cannot be in an active war at this moment. And this is according to the Bureau of European and Canadian Affairs, which is a branch of the U.S. Department of State, or an office of the U.S. Department of State. And so there is no rule under any technical requirement to join that says that they cannot be in a war. Technically, they could join right now. And also, under this key determinant, they also would have a very good reason in joining, as it says that NATO will strengthen the alliance and further basic objective of NATO enlargement to increase security and stability across Europe, and adding Ukraine into that alliance would help to increase the security and stability across Europe. And so they could join right now. It's just that it wouldn't be that smart because they would invoke Article 4 and Article 5 immediately, practically by default, and then we get involved in a war that we've been spending an entire year and a half trying to avoid. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well.
And also, one other thing I want to add is some folks, I believe, have misunderstood Zelensky's call to join NATO, meaning that he wants to get in right this second. What I understand he's calling for, and I hope this is what he means, because if Ukraine were to enter NATO right now, that basically means that we're being drugged right into a World War III situation. But what he actually means, what I think he means, is that he wants to get a defined plan to enter NATO in the future, meaning when the war is over. But that's just what I understand.
And also another thing, I saw someone say, DXBX said, Canada and respecting sovereignty? They stole Quebec's referendum choice. Notice it says sovereignty outside of their borders. It doesn't say that they can allow, like, they have to allow referendums to see if people want to leave their own country. And then also imagine how many problems that would cause if, say, Quebec wanted to leave, and then British Columbia, and then Alberta, and then they have to go through the process of trying to readmit all of these people into NATO again, and then for some reason Turkey doesn't like the people in Quebec because they're French Canadian or some weird thing, and because of that French Canadians do this, and so Turkey doesn't like it, or someone doesn't like it. That would be pretty difficult. Also, it says, once again, outside their borders, not within their borders, which is a very interesting side note right there. But anyways, with that, I hope we addressed that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says, if the West proposed to place nuclear weapons in Ukraine, would you be in support of this? 59% said no, don't place nukes in a war zone. 30% said yes, it would be a huge deterrent. 8% said unsure, and 3% said yes, but don't make it permanent. And I would be with the 59%. I personally would not think placing nuclear weapons in Ukraine would be a wise idea right now. If we were going to do that, we should have done it prior to the war breaking out back in February of last year. But to do that right now would be a little bit wild. But Enforcer, what say you?
The idea of putting nuclear weapons into a foreign country is an interesting one. According to the decision made within the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, it appears that it was not a smart idea. And according to President John, doing that crap. So according to Officer Thorne, I'm telling you, for some reason I'm stuck on that tonight, like doing that thing. But anyways, I would say that's not a smart idea to give Ukraine weapons. I believe that nuclear weapons should be heavily limited as to who can have them, and the countries that are able to possess them should be greatly limited in the number they have. And so I don't think it's a good idea to give Ukraine nukes, because who's to say, and I always bring this up because, what we're seeing right now is the situation in the present day. Who's to say that in 20 to 30 years' time, Ukraine doesn't become a rogue state itself, and we've now armed what will become probably one of our largest problems in Eastern Europe with nuclear weapons? That wouldn't be a smart idea. That's kind of like
Ukraine go rogue?
Well, I mean, like, hell, you gotta consider that all over. I mean, because any country can go rogue, any group can go rogue. Look at the Mujahideen. We supported the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, and then from what we understand, they were a part of the attack on 9/11. And so that is.
I understand where you're coming from. I'm largely being sarcastic, but I just take it a step at a time. Right now, Russia's in the wrong by invading Ukraine, but that doesn't mean we should, give Ukraine the secrets to the world or anything.
And I would agree. And on top of that, also look at this. With Iran, back when it was Persia, we gave Persia a lot of the most modern Western weaponry that the U.S. had, including F-14 Tomcats. After the revolution in Iran and the Shah was overthrown and the Islamic Republic came to be, almost the majority of their weapons to this day are American-made, and they still use them. They still have F-14s in their Air Force. And so I don't really think it's a great idea to give Ukraine nuclear weapons, because once they have them, who's to say that they, in 20 or 30 years' time, that may be a mistake. And on top of that, I don't like the idea of just giving out nuclear weapons to everyone we like, because if that's the case, we ought to be giving nuclear weapons to Poland, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Austria, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, Greece, Albania, Italy, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia, Slovenia, Andorra, Monaco, the Vatican City. We need to give some to San Marino. I'm not really into that all too much. And so with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and that was our last poll, so we are moving on to our many really good live chat questions. And up first, we have one from Dragoon50, who says, Enforcer Matt, about 10 days ago, Enforcer stated Ukraine would be retreating from Bakhmut in a few weeks. So was he wrong?
Yes. That's a simple answer. Yes, I would be wrong. So with that, I hope that does address that, and we are on to the next one.
The next one goes to Mando, who says, do you guys think that Lukashenko has been poisoned? And granted, he is 68, and I hope you guys are doing well.
I would say probably hasn't been poisoned. Probably he's just old. He is 68 years old. By Belarusian standards, he's reaching the end of his lifespan. So he's probably just old and going through some medical issues for that reason. Also, I hope you're doing good too, because we are doing amazingly. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And I hope we address that fairly well.
And the next one goes to Gabriel Mum, who says, why does Storm Shadow need to be launched from an aircraft if it dives and flies close to the ground anyway?
I don't really know why, but it is an air-launched missile. I don't really know the exact technical reason as to why air-launched missiles cannot be launched from the ground. Maybe they can be, but from what I understand, they just have to be launched from an aircraft because of their design. Beyond that, I wouldn't really know a technical answer to that question. But with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one is from Psyops, who says, have you noticed that the orcs stopped complaining about food around the same time that they got those 1,000 horses?
Yeah, that is interesting. I wonder what that... Dude, they must have gotten some Crystal's fast food drive-thrus on the front line at that exact time, too. Because, man, I'm telling you, I mean, like, Crystal's may be horse meat, but that's got to be some of the most schmacking horse meat you've ever had. And so with that, I hope that does answer that fairly well. Pretty interesting note, by the way. And also, I saw someone say... several viewers have said that there are NATO nukes in the Netherlands. But the Netherlands doesn't control those nukes. We do. We also have nuclear weapons in Germany. But the Germans don't own those nukes. They're our nukes, but they're there in Germany. It's kind of like how during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Soviets moved nuclear weapons to Cuba. The Cubans didn't own the nukes. The Soviets owned the nukes and the installations they were on. They just happened to be in Cuba. It's not the case that just because it's on someone's land they own them. They're still American nuclear weapons. It's just that they happen to not be in America. They're in the Netherlands, but they're still owned, operated, and maintained by the Department of Defense or the U.S. at large. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Edward Brady, who says, do you or the Enforcer think that Putin is now setting up Prighozin as the scapegoat for the loss in Ukraine?
Maybe. It kind of looks like it a little bit, but it also looks like Prigozhin's trying to frame himself that way as well. And I don't think he's willing to take a hit for the team like that, especially considering what we heard from the classified documents. It appears that he's willing for the Russians to take the hit so that way he can get a little extra step up on the ladder. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. Matthew, I just realized something. What if Prighozhin actually did work with the Ukrainians, and that's why the Ukrainians are making this landfell progress on the flanks, is because he did give away their positions exactly where they were and what the weakest links in the chain were.
Yeah, one thing I noticed about the story is it didn't really say that the Ukrainians never took him up on his offer. It just said that they were skeptical about it. That's all it said.
Interesting. Yeah, I was thinking about that right then. I was like, it is kind of weird how... easily the Ukrainians are just kind of sweeping them aside. And, and then you gave that little tidbit that he offered to give away their positions and stuff. And it's like nothing's happening to the Wagner in the dead center because the Wagner is only in the city of Bakhmut now. But everything else is happening to the Russian units surrounding Bakhmut. And it's like, that is interesting in a way that those two things are kind of coinciding at this time. I don't know. If he did that, good on him. He'll be falling out of a window soon. But at least he helped out the Ukrainian army for a good bit. And so with that, hope that does address that once again fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Major STU, who says, do you think Prighozhin will stay with his troops to the end, or will he bail?
I have a feeling he'll probably stay with his troops until the end, because if he leaves without them, he goes back to Russia, making himself an enemy of the government already, and he has really nothing to protect himself with or hide behind. So I think he'll probably stay with his men until the very end and probably surrender with them. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Rhonda Bailey, who says, have y'all seen the hedgehog armor?
The hedgehog armor, I don't think I have, so unfortunately I'll have to declare ignorance on that one. Maybe I have, and I'm just not really remembering what it is. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Portstan, who says, this is a question from the chat. How come planes shot down are not listed in the daily update of losses?
Apparently they're not listed because the Ukrainians only list the ones that they managed to shoot down. So they never count Russian training incidents where they lose aircraft or helicopters as their kills. And so that's why none of those 5 aircraft were identified as Ukrainian kills, because they didn't shoot them down. Apparently the Russians shot them down themselves, which is crazy to think they'd shoot down 5 aircraft, but apparently that's the reality we're living in now. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Raj Kapoor, who says, do you think that France will give new weapons to Ukraine as Zelensky is visiting once again? And I believe he has. I don't know the exact equipment that's been promised, but something was given. I did see that earlier.
And yes, they will probably be continuing to give more equipment, although Macron went over to China and said some goofy stuff, and then came back, which made it kind of seem like he wasn't going to be supporting Ukraine all that much anymore. Everyone in France pretty much came out and rebutted that statement, and now he's shut up on those stupid ideas, and it appears that he's continuing on as usual, although we kind of know what he really thinks now. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to the miserable GIT, who says, has the U.S. drone that crashed in the Black Sea been recovered yet? And slow Ukraine from the UK battalion of the LSA.
And hello to the UK battalion of the LSA. And to answer that question, I don't think... Which drone was supposed to be recovered?
That U.S. drone that crashed in the Black Sea that the Russians were running after?
Oh, it's been long recovered at this point. That was months ago. So they've surely gotten everything they wanted from that drone out of the Black Sea. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, hello to the UK, one of our largest, I guess you could say, viewer groups outside of the United States of America. You know what? I'm kind of curious. How in the world do those analytics break down nowadays? Because I don't really know how many of y'all are from where anymore. So let me go to geography and let me see. So, wow, this is actually crazy, Matthew. As of this month, the past 28 days, our viewer base has become 10% less American. It went from 55% to now it's 45%. The second largest viewership we have is Canadian, coming in at 9.1%. The third largest is trailing just right behind them, which is the British, coming in at 8.9%.
Leave it to the Brits.
And then Australia is also the next one at 4.9%. And then Germany is actually in the top 5 with 4.3% of our viewers this month, around 90,000 of y'all, coming from Germany. That is actually crazy. Like, the groups have changed so much since, like, months ago. Let me go back to March. In March, our viewership was 53% American. That is interesting. I don't know. We're getting a market increase of, let's see, let me make sure. We're getting a market increase of British viewers and Canadian viewers as well. They're just kind of gradually climbing as time goes by. And that is interesting. So the UK division of the LSA is actually growing. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And hello to all of our British viewers. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And that either means that the American, some of the American viewers have gotten disinterested in the war, or that means the Europeans are starting to get very interested in it for some reason. But I would imagine it's probably the Americans losing interest to a major extent.
Actually, interestingly enough, let me go back to March and check that out real quick. In March, at this moment, and you remember, we're just looking at the past 28 days, so this includes part of April and half of April, half of March. We have gotten almost 700,000 more views compared to the month of March, and it appears that the overall number of Americans that were watching back then is actually the exact same as we're seeing right now. So it's actually that the Americans that we've had are still sticking around, but we're being joined by a lot more Canadian and British viewers now.
Aha. Well, I'm glad to
Interesting.
hear it.
And so with that, hope that addresses that fairly well. Very interesting. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one is from Hoodoo, Texas, who says, by what logic is Ukraine going to invade Russian soil when they have not even come close to clearing the Russians out of their own occupied lands?
The logic is that they could use it as a negotiating chip to get back Ukrainian land by exchanging the captured Russian land. That's the logic that it is under. There is really no necessary requirement that they have to retake all of the ground that is lost in Ukraine to then invade Russia, because you could just conduct an even exchange. It would be similar in a way to saying, why in the world would we invade Sicily in 1943 with French forces as a part of that invasion when we haven't liberated France yet from the Germans? It would be kind of a similar argument there. You know, it's more so what would be the most advantageous thing to get us to the end point of winning the war than just trying to go about liberating the Ukrainian land first just because it's Ukrainian land. And so with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And also, we haven't done this in a long time because it's somewhat shameful, but I have to plug our sponsor, Nord Stream VPN. Have y'all heard of that one?
we're not sponsored by them, by the way. I have to make that clear.
That's fake. Nord Stream VPN. You didn't get it.
Well, dude, I heard that, man. I was like, dude, I don't know what that is supposed to be, but I was like, we're not sponsored by them for legal reasons.
Oh my god,
dude, some VPN out there that just got founded today called Nord Stream is probably going to come up and say, hey, we're not sponsoring, but cease and desist. Now I'm gonna be like, hey, whoa, yeah, hey, whoa, calm down. But anyway,
well, the Nord Stream VPN's recently been serviced by some very kind Russian boats. So it may be out of operation for a while.
Perhaps. Dude, that honestly scared me, though. I didn't catch on the joke. I was like, wait a minute, we're not sponsored by anyone. We're not sponsored by anyone.
I can tell you're shaking.
Also, by the way, we may not be sponsored by anyone, but, I got to make you all hungry, and I forgot that we need to do this tonight. I have to give a plug to our absolute favorite pizza store in the world. So let me take y'all to Birmingham real quick. And we have a couple of viewers in Alabama, so it is worth the shout-out. And let me see, where is the specific... It's around here somewhere. It is right here. This one. Capella Pizzeria. We went here today and we got some pizza. Pizza. This stuff is killer good. This is a great place, number one. Number two, their pizza is literally to die for. You cannot find better pizza here in Alabama. Now, there may be better pizza in other states. I don't know. I haven't eaten pizza in other states. But here in Alabama, this is number one. And we also got their desserts today. Nobody said anything about these cannolis, but we got some of these cannolis, and we also got some of the cakes as well. And man, I'm telling you.
Man, that pistachio cake is bussin'. Oh my goodness.
And there it is
right there on the left.
Yeah, that's it. This is to die for right here. I mean, this stuff is amazing. And also the pizzas, man, don't even get me started on the pizzas. You're starting off with like amazing pizza, and then you're moving straight from amazing pizza and right into amazing desserts. It's unbelievable stuff. It's delicious. I have to plug these people because it's like a mom and pop shop standalone business, and I do not want them to have a lacking of business. I want them to succeed because their pizza is that good that I would go out my way to plug them on this channel. And so if you're ever traveling through Alabama, or if you live in Alabama and you're passing through Birmingham, you have to come to this pizza store. You have to get a pizza or eat there regularly. I mean, like, hell, even fly in from wherever, fly in from Britain to this pizza place and eat the pizza. It's great. It's unbelievably good. And I have to give them a plug because we ate them today with my mom for Mother's Day, and it was amazingly good. We got a new pizza, too. What was the name of it, Matthew? It was like a Palermo, I believe?
Yes, a Palermo.
A Palermo.
Hey, there's that cake.
Dude, there's that cake, man. That cake be bussin'. But I got to tell you, it's amazingly good, and y'all have got to try it out. Here it is, I think. Nope. Yeah, that is it. That is it. That's a Palermo pizza right there. It is amazing. It is great. Y'all have to try this stuff out if you ever come here. But with that, I had to give him a plug. I just had to because I sat there and I actually said to him today when I was in there, I was like, hey, we gave you all a plug like a couple of days ago on our channel. And so if any of them are watching, we're giving them another plug because they are just that good. I love that pizza. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And the next one goes to Nathan Knox, who says, Enforcer Matt, does Britain give or gift weapons? Or are they lend-lease? British Prime Minister said gifted.
I I would say they're probably giving it to them. We haven't really heard a lot about them supposedly leasing. They just say they're giving these weapons to Ukraine, so I'm just guessing that they're signing them off and handing them off without expecting really anything in return. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least from what we understand. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, that crust wasn't burnt, by the way, that y'all saw in that. It's actually cooked in some kind of wood-fired oven. And it's a Neapolitan pizza, I believe is what it's called. But it's very, very good, I got to say. But up next, we have a question from Danny Coco, who says, I read somewhere that Ukraine has 700,000 troops ready, and what are your thoughts?
And reread that one again.
I read somewhere that Ukraine has 700,000 troops ready, and what are your thoughts?
Probably not, because that means that their armed forces has increased by a factor of 3 in size, and I just don't think that would be possible. So I'd have to really honestly say it's probably not around there. It's probably around 500,000, maybe at the largest for the Army alone. The Air Force probably far smaller than that. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least from what we understand, but we don't have any exact Ukrainian force numbers to work off of. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Aussie Wayne, who says, is Steven Seagal making a movie for Russia? And imagine the BS plot. We don't want to see his movies.
Man, I don't want to see. Man, I don't even want to see that guy on my screen. Like that goatee, man. I got to tell you, I have a goatee. So I know a thing or two about goatees because I have one on my face. His goatee is like the ugliest goatee I've ever seen. Like look at this thing, Steven.
What kind of movies does he want to make anyway?
I don't know, but look at this goatee, and tell me that this isn't the most like hideous goatee. I mean, the thing looks gross. I mean, it's bad. It's really bad. And also on top of that, he is psychotic. You know, that's been known, but he's really psychotic. And that's the kind of that's the kind of people that Russia has gravitating to them, is absolute psychos who hover over Putin like they're about to molest him. So with that, dude, he looks like he's about to say, "I smell pork and beans on you," or something like that. I mean, that's creepy, man. That's pretty creepy. But
seriously though, what movie is he trying to make? Is there any info on it on the internet?
I don't know, but I just noticed that. Let's say Aquaman's been compromised.
What's he doing?
I don't know, man. I don't know what he's doing. But he looks a little weirded out, honestly. That's good. Weird him out, man. But with that, hope that addresses that fairly well, at least the best we can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Daniel Russell. He says, Matt, what happened to the TikTok army?
The TikTok, oh, they disappeared. I mean, hell, supposedly they're in Bakhmut. We only saw one video of them entering the town, and we've never seen anything from them since. So I guess they entered for a photo op and then left immediately, from what we may know, because we haven't seen them since. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Just Me. Any news on the Russian missile found in Poland?
We haven't had any other news about that. They found it, and then the news went silent, and they're not really telling us a lot about it. So beyond the fact that it landed in Poland and apparently didn't explode, we don't have any extra news, well, any additional news to work off of with that story. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and I hope we answer that fairly well.
All right, and up next, we have a question from MSVS, who says, I know that the USA and NATO has special transponders to let air defense know that they're friendly, and do Russians have it?
I would assume they may, but I don't really know. And on top of that, there was also a couple of friendly fire incidents in the Gulf War with aircraft. How many aircraft were shot down by friendly fire in the Gulf War? List of friendly fire incidents.
There's a lot.
Dude, look at this, man. It's like the English Civil War, the 9 Years' War, French and Indian War, Revolutionary War, Napoleonic Wars, American Civil War, World War I. It's literally a book. It's like, dang, man. It's like, that got bad. World War II, once again, another book. Dang, man. When war, there's always going to be friendly fire in a war, because no matter your best efforts, things will always get confusing here and there. But dang, man. Good Lord, it never ends. Hang on. Okay, so now we're getting down to the Gulf War. And here's the troubles. Oh man, that's just rough altogether. And here we go. Finally, the Gulf War. A U.S. Air Force A-10 was attacked by a British warrior. Well, an A-10 attacked a British warrior, but we're looking for aircraft being shot down. So let's see here. We're killed in an Apache. Let's see. Dang, dude, the A-10s, man, they were doing work on U.S. ground forces. I mean, like, the friendly fire incidents involving A-10s are kind of a lot just for the Gulf War alone. Let's see here. Actually, I can't find any friendly fire incidents where we shot down our own aircraft, at least according to Wikipedia, in the Gulf War. But I have
now, real quick, with the transponders, there's typically an ADS-B, which can be turned off. I'm not sure if there's one that can be turned off. And then there's, I believe, if I'm not correct or incorrect, there's IFF as well, which is used to identify friendly forces.
I believe so. I believe you are correct. But I'm trying to find here still aircraft that were shot down. Actually, there was a decent amount that were shot down. Let's see. Hit by RPG. Crashes after a tail strike. Black Hawk collide. Wait, 2 Black Hawks collide and crash after one aircraft coming under fire. Everyone pretty much was killed. And then 5 others were injured in Mosul. Good God, man, there was a lot of stuff that happened in 2003 during the invasion, and I'm not really seeing a lot about them being shot down by friendly fire. And so apparently that is an incredibly rare, if not impossible, thing here in U.S. forces or the Western world for us to have aircraft shot down by friendly fire. So it may be that they don't have those transponders and they're just looking up into the sky and they're trying to work off of people communicating to them when the aircraft should be flying over their area. Maybe. Because it would be bizarre for them to shoot down 5 of them and they all had active transponders showing that they were friendly aircraft. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Diamond, who says, Ukraine will have one of the most experienced and trained militaries. NATO would be foolish to not bring them into the fold. And what do you both think?
I think that they certainly need to be in NATO just for the strategic reason that the nation of Ukraine serves in letting us be in striking distance of Volgograd and Moscow from a second direction. I also think that Ukraine will be battle experienced for sure. The U.S. has also been incredibly battle experienced over the past 20, 30 years or so. Very well battle experienced and has a lot of doctrine revolving around those experiences. But Ukraine should certainly join, not just for the experience that their armed forces will have, but because they are an economy to be tapped into that will be incredibly beneficial not only for them, but for the rest of the Western world. And on top of that, they will also serve a great strategic purpose for NATO in ensuring to put the Russians an extra rung down the ladder and closer towards being on the extinct scale if a conventional war was to begin. And so with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well. And we are on to the second to last question of the night.
Now, in reality, right now, Ukraine is receiving a ton of help from NATO countries, and they're not even in it yet. So, in reality, what would joining NATO actually do for Ukraine that's not already being done?
Joining NATO would give them a security guarantee that they would never be attacked again. Because while they're getting a lot of stuff from NATO, if you're a part of NATO, that means the U.S. will be involved in your war if a war ever happens with you where it's a defensive one. But
right now, though, we're already providing Ukraine pretty much everything they want. And even if Ukraine joined NATO, that doesn't guarantee that we're going to send them F-16s and all this other equipment they want. So what's Zelensky's rush in trying to get into NATO? Because it really doesn't change anything, except for our troops would have to get directly involved in their war.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. In the future, if a war ever broke out, we would be there with them. And that also guarantees that a war would never break out because no one's going to want to face down the United States in the open field.
Right, but what is the rush right now for him to get in it, though? Because he's dying to get in it, like, right now.
Probably so that way the Russians try and broker a peace, so that way they don't end up dealing with the U.S. forces on the open field.
Maybe that's it. Maybe
so. But with that, I hope we addressed that fairly well, and we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Nafo Power, who says, it's been reported that Lukashenko was poisoned and is in a coma, and do you think the coma part is true?
I don't don't really think the poison part is true. He is just old. It's kind of like when an 80-year-old actor dies and someone goes, "Oh, he was killed by the deep state." It's like, well, maybe he was just like 80 years old and dying. You know, like he's quite old. You know, so I would have to say probably just old. And also may or may not be in a coma. We did hear a long time ago that Shoigu had been poisoned and was in a coma, and then like 2 days later, he was giving a briefing and was perfectly fine. So that appeared to have been completely untrue. So every time someone like disappears in Russia, I'm not always assuming that they're in a coma and near death, because usually they may just be going in for one thing or another. Hell, I think our president disappeared here in the United States for a week, like a few months ago, and then he came out of the hospital from something. I think he had some kind of a minor surgery or was in it for something. I don't really know, but you know, once again, it's kind of normal, especially when you're talking about people that, by most terms, are nearing the end of their lifespan to kind of be in and out of the hospital. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the final question of the night. And so who is the lucky last person who asked the lucky last question of the night?
All right, and that viewer is Tone, who says, do we hear anything from the work of Ukraine partisans and work and damage that they're doing?
I would say that we have heard a lot about what Ukrainian partisans are doing. They have been burning down signal boxes inside of Russia. They have also been blowing up factories and warehouses. They've also blown up trains, full locomotives, and their consist on active railways. They've been doing loads of stuff. Even inside of occupied Ukraine, they've been taking pictures and relaying information about Russian force positions and locations, among many other things. The partisans have been incredibly active. We don't get to see a lot of what they do within occupied territory, but we do get to see a lot of what they do inside of Russia, and even going as far as burning down conscription offices and other government buildings. So they've been doing an excessively large amount of stuff for what we assume is a group that maybe numbers in the tens of thousands, which compared to the overall population of Russia is a drop in the bucket. But with that, I hope we addressed that question fairly well, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I thank you all so much once again for watching, and we have raised $9,941 for Razom for Ukraine. An amazing number. And Igor! And I got to thank every single one of y'all so much once again for helping this fundraiser to reach the heights that it did. We are only $59 away from reaching $10,000. And it is unbelievable to think that we've been able to do that with all of y'all here tonight, again, on the 445th day. I'm sure that all of the Ukrainians that will be helped out by this support that Razom for Ukraine will receive will be great. And of course, I bet they will all be incredibly appreciative to the folks that helped them to get there. While Razom for Ukraine, because these donations are just sent in a large packet by YouTube to those nonprofits, they will never really specifically know who raised that for Razom for Ukraine. But one thing's for certain, our help and effort for Razom for Ukraine will be known by the Ukrainians who received that help from Razom. And I'm sure that if they were able to thank every single one of y'all who supported Razom tonight personally, they would, because what y'all are doing is helping to change the lives of Ukrainians throughout the nation. And so with that, thank you all so much once again for watching. I hope you have a good night. Stay safe. And we just reached $10,000! Let's go! Dude, amazing. Right at the end, someone threw in a $100 donation and got it up to $10,041. And I got to thank y'all so much for that, because that means that we're able to round out tonight in the 5 digits for a fundraiser. Incredible to see. And I got to thank you all so much once again for coming. Of course, I'll see you all on Tuesday night. We will not be airing tomorrow night, but we will have a short war summary coming out as usual. But I will see you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 48 hours of the war. And thank you all so much once again for helping out as many people in Ukraine as we can. Long live the Lee Spring Army. Good night, good luck, stay safe, take care, and of course, Slava Ukraini.
And good night, and Slava Ukraine. Hear Slava.
Yes.
The Lee Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.